Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. On today's programme, we see how organised criminal gangs are making small fortunes dumping waste on Britain's countryside.
Could jury-free trials save the criminal justice system from collapse? How new recommendations are causing concern.
Plus, Cabinet Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds joins us shortly after a stark warning from the budget watchdog on the future of Britain's finances.
It is Wednesday, the 9th of July. I lose track.
Thank God it's not Tuesday.
By the way, that was scripted correctly. It was all on me, on every single level.
I love this start to the programme.
Should we get to the headlines?
Yeah, go for it.
What day is it again?
It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. All right. The £1 billion a year problem of illegal waste. We trace one fly tipping site back to a group allegedly making money from the crime. A signature state banquet for President Macron and a King's speech on the need for cross-channel cooperation.
Our security services and police will go further still to protect us against the profound challenges of terrorism, organised crime, cyber attacks, and, of course, irregular migration.
A second impromptu meeting between President Trump and Israel's Prime Minister last night as ceasefire negotiations boiled down to just one issue. A very good morning to you. Waste crime is a booming problem in the UK. The Environment Agency's described it as the new narcotics for the way in which it allows organised criminal gangs to cash in. In the latest in a series by Sky News, we've uncovered a group allegedly making money from fly tipping on farmland. Rachel Venables went to track them down.
In farmers' fields all over the country, organised fly tipping is destroying our environment and costing us billions.
My first line of defence, which were these gates, as you can see, they've been bent and broken.
The steel gates and concrete bollards which surround this one farm in Berkshire can't keep the criminals out.
Yeah, it's the bane of our life, really. Fly tipping, blocking up and unblocking the entrances. Constant battle.
It's costing the farmer tens of thousands of pounds every year.
We've had it on locations where organised gangs have actually broken into locations, put their own security man there and had fly tipping in from out of London. They filled the warehouses up to the eaves with contaminated waste.
Waste criminals will be paid to remove rubbish, but instead of taking it to the tip or landfill, which costs money, they dump it for huge profit in places like this.
We're in Hartwood Forest, just north of St Albans, a normally beautiful public space. But overnight, someone or a group broke in through the gates here and dumped lorry load after lorry load after lorry load after lorry load of rubbish and rubble. And they drove off, leaving it in this state.
We're on the hunt for the people responsible. And while looking for evidence, we find a huge amount of personal information telling us where this waste has come from.
That's the bags, which I believe is ours.
Builder Charlie, not his real name, paid two men with a van £300 to remove waste from a recent project.
Do you feel cheated?
I do, yeah.
With evidence from multiple customers, Sky News' data and forensics unit were able to track down a group of waste carriers working together. Videos they posted on TikTok show them clearing out properties, waving huge wads of cash at the camera. One such clip appears to show them shovelling debris into what looks like an abandoned warehouse, another more clearly on the side of a country road. We tracked one of them down to a housing estate in London.
And we believe that waste that you've been paid to remove has been dumped illegally in the countryside.
Well, I don't do rubbish removals.
Have you ever fly tipped? Have you ever made money from fly tipping?
No, I don't do rubbish removals.
He denied all knowledge of the dumping. Waste crime is a huge and growing problem, but enforcement is patchy and the legal punishments often lacking. Every time waste is illegally dumped, someone has to pay to clean it up, knowing that before long, it'll happen all over again. This is a national battle, one that we're all losing. Rachel Venables, Sky News in Hertfordshire.
Well, we're going to read just St Albans District and City Council statement. They said that they won't hesitate to prosecute or fine offenders once they have the necessary evidence, and that it has been taking robust action against fly tipping for years. We're going to have more on that special report from Rachel throughout the day, and you can scan the QR code now to get more on it. And we'll be talking to a number of guests, including at 7:30 on that topic. But time now for all of the day's other top stories. Leah's got those for us.
Thank you so much, Wilfred. We're going to talk about those flash floods in Texas over the weekend. More than 160 people are still missing after last week's deadly flash floods. At least 109 people are confirmed to have died over the July 4th weekend, including 27 children at a girls' summer camp in Kerr County.
Texas will not stop until we finish the job. We will not stop until we identify, recover every single body. We'll not stop until every road is rebuilt, every inch of debris is removed. We'll not stop because we are a state that cares about our people, cares about our communities, and we'll be with them every step of the way.
A fast-moving wildfire in France's second-largest city, Marseille, has left 110 people with minor injuries. The blaze was fanned by 70-mile-per-hour winds, but has now been brought under control. More than 1,000 firefighters were deployed to tackle the fire. A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. This is following a fatal stabbing in East London. 26-year-old Tyler Hayward was found with a stab wound in Waltham Forest on Sunday evening. Police are calling for anyone with information to come forward. The Department for Education has come under fire from MPs over its handling of England's worsening teacher shortage. MPs say it's unclear how a promise to recruit 6,500 new teachers in England will actually be achieved. Committees accuse Downing Street of lacking a coherent plan. An extra 263 people in London likely died in the recent heat wave. This is according to new research. It's prompted warnings that British classrooms, homes and hospitals are ill-prepared to deal with increasing temperatures as another heat wave kicks in from today. And French President Emmanuel Macron was treated to a blend of British pomp and ceremony, plus a sprinkling of royal charm at a state banquet overnight. There was a star-studded guest list too for the event at Windsor Castle, which capped off the first day of Emmanuel Macron's three-day visit. Switching between French and English, King Charles celebrated the deep ties between the two nations and spoke of the need for cooperation in facing cross-border threats.
A millennium ago, this castle was built to guard the Western approach to London. Today, our two countries face a multitude of more complex threats, emanating from multiple directions. As friends and as allies, we face them together. These challenges know no borders. No fortress can protect us against them this time. Our security services and police will go further still to protect us against the profound challenges of terrorism, organised crime, cyber attacks, and, of course, irregular migration.
Mari's joined us now. And, you know, that was the pomp, the ceremony, the royal dazzling. But today it's going to be a bit more gritty politics. What's on the table for the two leaders?
Yeah, so the niceties, as it were, end this morning. There's a sustainability event in Windsor, and then after that, they kind of get down to business. So there's going to be discussions in Whitehall between Macron and Starmer. The two spouses will go off and spend time together privately, and we're kind of waiting to see exactly what's announced, specifically really on migration. So we're expecting Macron to announce new French tactics to stop boats crossing the Channel, potentially things like specialist police intercepting them up to 300 metres from the shoreline. And then, obviously, there is the all-important British-France summit tomorrow, in which we could see perhaps a big policy announcement on that. We still don't know yet the progress of the negotiations around a one-in, one-out policy we were talking about yesterday, whether that is still on the cards, how soon it could be announced. And from what we've understood so far, there are still lots of discussions going on and things are not finalised. And I think you saw that clip from the King there, but also in Macron's speech yesterday, he was talking quite a lot about tangible results. He wants to see tangible results when it comes to small boats crossings and really kind of addressing exactly how you get those numbers down, and the fact that a third of all illegal migrants coming into Europe are wanting to go to the UK.
That statistic struck me.
It's really striking, really striking. So clearly he feels that actually the amount of appetite there is for people to come to the UK is perhaps part of the problem.
We were rewatching the speech to clarify exactly what he said in a number of areas. It was quite long, actually. We built it up. I'd really look forward to it.
Not so much.
Dragged a little bit.
He likes a long speech.
He does like a long speech. A third, he said, I think, attempted to make it here, or wanted to make it here. So, because I don't think... It almost would sort of defend the idea that 100,000 or up to 100,000 a year might make it across if millions were actually trying to. But I don't think a third, I haven't checked this number, but a third reach it to the northern shore of France.
No.
So I thought that was an interesting statistic. By the way, we're joined by Indian McTaggart, a royal expert at 7:45 to discuss some of the takeaways from last night. I still want to know what they ate and drank as well.
There is a menu. I'm going to dig it out in the
Oh, you're not
papers, don't
saying there
worry.
was a special cocktail?
I hope we gave them... Did we give... I should have checked this. Well, we'll talk about it at 7:45, but I hope we gave... God, I had a great picture there. I hope we gave them English wine. Did we?
Yes, English champagne. I'll reveal that only.
OK, good, because, we should... And I hope he comes away... Someone should ask him, I hope, because he has to say he loved it whilst he's here, doesn't he?
I think
so anyway...
I'm very sceptical about English sparkling wine.
I'm going off on tangents here, but we'll come to this 7:45. Great that we've got Nick Thomas-Symonds today, because he is the Minister for EU Relations. He's done the renegotiation with the EU, so we can pick apart some of that with him. Also, though, Mari, we're going to have to pick apart this OBR report, and it's more of a long-term report into the perilous state of our finances, but it just underlines what we're all talking about in the short term, which is we need some more tax hikes to come
exactly.
in the short term.
So the OBR, they put up this report yesterday, and it was really... It was very, very depressing reading, I think, when it comes to the state of the UK's finances. It talked about how vulnerable we are in some areas, how much we are borrowing, and if we essentially carry on the way that we're going, we're going to end up borrowing 270% of GDP by 2070. And basically, the OBR are kind of asking gently governments to actually follow through on promises. And they specifically pointed to the amount of spending cuts that were promised and then not delivered again and again. And they're saying that that is contributing to part of the problem in terms of the amount of money we are spending and borrowing, and we're not reining it in perhaps the way that we should. Very uncomfortable for Labour at the moment, considering the U-turn we already had. Very uncomfortable, especially for those on the left of the Labour Party that want more spending. And therefore then the grows and the calls for things like wealth taxes will increase. But there probably needs to be a really serious examination of what we're spending on and whether we can really afford it.
And there's some really great data, some great charts in that OBR report. By the way, the key parts of it broken down by Ed. If you look at Ed Conway's Twitter, in fact mine, I've just retweeted it as well. He's got a 7-minute kind of primer on all of the key details. I hope the government minister hasn't watched it yet, because I might steal a lot of my questions. He might have the answers if he's watched it, but hopefully he hasn't. Anyway, Mark, great stuff for now. Now, Sky News understands a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas could be close, with just one sticking point remaining, that of IDF troops operating inside Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister and President Donald Trump met again overnight as intense negotiations continue in Qatar. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has the latest.
Sense of momentum certainly here in Washington. A second and unexpected meeting between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. It lasted around about an hour at tea time in Washington. We don't know what was discussed. What we do know is that of the three key challenges remaining which prevent Israel and Hamas from agreeing to a ceasefire, two of those three challenges have now been overcome. One is the issue of humanitarian aid. Who distributes it within Gaza? Well, we understand it has been agreed that in areas where the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, is not operating, the areas they pull back from, The aid will be distributed not by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this American-funded, Israeli-run organization. Instead, it will be either the UN or another third-party, more traditional aid organizations who distribute the aid. Hamas is pleased with this. Israel appears to have accepted this. The second issue, which is now agreed, is the 60-day ceasefire. Hamas has a concern that after 60 days, after it's given away all its chips, effectively, to put it bluntly, handed over all the hostages, that Israel would then simply re-invade Gaza and start the war again. Well, they, Hamas, appear to have got a commitment, pretty extraordinary, from President Trump, that he will ensure that Israel goes beyond 60 days and does not re-invade. So that is the good news. The bad news, and it is obviously naturally the hardest one to overcome, which is why they haven't yet done so, is the status of the Israeli forces in Gaza beyond during this ceasefire and beyond 60 days. Where does the IDF withdraw to? Do they withdraw altogether? Absolutely not, says Israel, because Hamas will simply rearm. Do they withdraw to certain parts of the Gaza Strip? Perhaps. This issue they are not yet agreed on. It could be pretty challenging. Netanyahu's due to leave Washington on Thursday. The best case scenario is that Netanyahu, with Trump, would announce some sort of a ceasefire, but we are not there yet.
Mark Stone there for us in Washington. Now, thousands of defendants could lose the right to a jury trial under plans proposed to save the criminal justice system from collapse. Former Justice Sir Brian Leveson has made several recommendations. They include reducing jury trials to hear only the most serious cases, diverting cases like fraud to a magistrates' court or a new Crown Court bench division, placing a greater focus on resolving matters outside of court, and the penalty for offences such as drug possession, bike theft and voyeurism could be halved from the current maximum jail sentence of 2 years. Sadie has been looking through some of the key recommendations and joins us now. What jumps out?
So, look, we are in a system where there are more than 75,000 cases currently waiting to be heard in the criminal justice system. Some people are waiting 4 years for their case to go to court. That is the idea of the backlog that we have, and that's why this recommendation was made, to come up with a new plan, which is being unveiled today, to shake up the structure of the courts. The authors say that this is the most sweeping transformation of criminal courts in a generation, and the idea is to try and save 9,000 sitting days in court per year going forward, and this is to rescue a system on the brink of collapse. Sir Brian Leveson is the man in charge of this. He says, our criminal justice system stands at a critical juncture. It is well recognised that justice delayed is justice denied, but the record and rising court backlog means victims, witnesses and defendants are waiting months, sometimes years, for cases to come to trial, unable to move on with their lives, and this situation is simply unacceptable. So he lays out some recommendations which he says should be implemented immediately. You mentioned some of them. The one that stands out is getting rid of the jury in certain cases. And so the idea is to have two systems. One is a new Crown Court bench division, which will have a judge and two magistrates. And the other one is for more serious crimes. The Crown Court remains that, but to not have juries. He's gone through a whole long list of why this is. He says jury times have more than doubled since 2001. Judges are taking longer to give directions to juries, and it's harder for people to take those 2 weeks off that is usually required. He goes into talking about how juries cost a lot of money as well, and the impact on jurors' personal lives. But the Bar Council, which represents barristers, says you shouldn't take the jury away from this, because the jury isn't the thing that caused the problem in the first place. Here's what they've said. They say, we recognise the pressures facing the criminal justice system and the need for reform to tackle the backlogs. However, we continue to argue that there is no need to curtail the right to trial by jury from both a principle and practical position. Juries represent society and are a fundamental part of our system. And the Solicitors' Council, the Law Society, says more funding is needed across the entire system.
Really, really great setup for us, Sadia, and we're going to talk, thank you very much, we're going to talk to the government about this now. Nick Thomas-Symonds is about to join us. He's a former barrister, so one of the perfect people we can talk to about it. We're also going to talk to him, of course, about that OBR report that we mentioned already with Mari, and, of course, the key takeaways of the ongoing state visit that President Macron is having here in the UK over the next 48 hours, kicking off yesterday, of course, with that state banquet. Well, I'm delighted to say I am joined now by the Paymaster General, Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's also led the EU renegotiations. Great to have you with us. Good morning to you, Minister.
Great to join you.
Why don't we pick up, first of all, on that Leveson review? And as I mentioned, you're a former barrister, so it's an area that you know a lot about. Central to it is obviously trying to reduce the backlogs versus not wanting to break the principles that the justice system upholds. If you do drop the right to a jury for crimes that would only get up to a 2-year sentence, is that a principle that we should continue to hold dear? And is the payoff, which the report I think acknowledges, not rich enough, I guess? It doesn't significantly reduce the backlogs.
Well, firstly, the report that Sir Brian Leveson has produced is a very serious piece of work. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood faced the situation coming into office of a justice system, frankly, in crisis. That's why we asked Sir Brian Leveson to conduct an independent review. We have tens of thousands of people waiting in the Crown Court backlog. Now, we've already taken some action. We have already, for example, increased the number of Crown Court sitting days by 4,000. We've invested £450 million in the criminal justice system. We've increased magistrate sentencing powers. But to your point about trial by jury, now, Sir Brian Leveson has produced a series of, very thoughtful proposals to deal with this. It's always been the case in our criminal justice system that some trials have been dealt with via a jury, some have not. I mean, more than 90% of our criminal cases are dealt with in the magistrates' courts as it stands. But with that proposal and all the other proposals, we will now look carefully at them with a view to legislating in the autumn. It's a very serious piece of work Sir Brian Leveson has done. Obviously, there's also a proposal for those that plead guilty at the first instance that you could reduce the discount to their sentence by more than currently, from 33% down to 40%. And you do pair that with some of the early releases that are happening either by design or by the pressure on the system. What would be the government's response to the idea that criminals aren't being sufficiently punished? Well, we are determined to ensure that we deal with crime in this country. That is why we'll have additional neighbourhood police officers in terms of crime detection. But let me just take the criminal justice system, because this is important. We were left with a situation where we had our prisons essentially at breaking point. They were being run so close to capacity that we were running the risk of literally having a situation in this country where judges wouldn't be able to send people to prison. Now, I'm sure I'd have to tell those who are watching this the consequences that would have for safety on our streets and for crime. And that is because the previous government simply did not build the prison places that were needed over the 14 years that they were in power. Now, we are going to add those additional prison places, but you can't just produce them instantly. So what we have to do is take difficult decisions to ensure we keep the public safe. But that is where you are left if you are left with a prison system that is bursting at the seams as it was. Let's talk about President Macron, who's obviously in town, and there's talks that there's going to be a one-in, one-out system of some form with illegal boat crossings. Can you expand on that? Is that an ambitious enough plan for the UK to be pursuing? Well, look, I'm not going to give a running commentary on specific proposals, but what I will say about the work that we're doing jointly with the French authorities is absolutely crucial. Now, look, I've been down to Dover, I've been across to France, I've seen the work that is going on, and only in recent weeks we've seen, for example, 9 people in a court in Lille, with help from our National Crime Agency, sentenced to a total of 64 years in prison for people smuggling offences. We've seen, again, great work from the National Crime Agency in tracking down a people smuggler in Coventry for smuggling people between Belgium and the United Kingdom. And we've also, in the time we've been in office, prevented 12,000 people from crossing the Channel who otherwise would have done, but for the joint work that we're doing. Now, this is not an easy issue. I'm not suggesting for a moment that there is a silver bullet, but that joint working is absolutely crucial to trying to get down the boat numbers in the Channel. But I guess, I mean, you mentioned 12,000 have been stopped that would have otherwise crossed, but 20,000 have made it across so far this year. It's at a record since they began in 2018. So I guess thus far, this joint approach, this warm and friendly approach, hasn't worked so far? Well, we've prevented 12,000 people from otherwise crossing. And I know we talked about the numbers in the first part of the year, but there was a 10-week period, for example, in the summer of 2022 when 20,000 people made that crossing. Now, we can talk about the numbers, but the truth is none of us want to see people in those boats making that dangerous crossing across the channel. But there's no doubt that the joint working is effective. But of course we need to do more. That is why the government is also making the choice to give our law enforcement terrorism-style powers to deal with the crime of people smuggling. And that's, by the way, a choice this government is making to do even more. That's being opposed by both Reform and the Conservatives in Parliament. So, of course, we need to do more. But the choice we are making is trying to deal with this issue in a practical way that is going to make a difference. Not slogans, but actually making a difference.
Well, again, with all due respect, so far, your policies aren't making a difference.
Well, they are making a significant difference because of the numbers that we have prevented from crossing the channel. But I'm not suggesting for a moment there isn't more to do to get those numbers down. And that joint work with the French is a crucial part of that.
We'll wait with bated breath for if there's a further big policy to come on this one in, one out over the next couple of days. In terms of relations with the French more broadly, you've obviously led the renegotiation with the EU. We also heard Macron say he doesn't want to allow the channel to grow wider, and he argued for exchanges for students, researchers and artists. It was a line that got quite broad positive response in Parliament. Is that new to you in terms of the negotiations that you've done with the EU? Is that additional to what was already agreed, or is that kind of part of the plan yet to be kind of finalised?
No, those are matters that are already within the common understanding, the new strategic partnership we have with the European Union. I think that the government has already set out, we move to a smart, balanced, controlled youth experience scheme, which will involve young people in the United Kingdom having the opportunity to go out to Europe, and young Europeans then be able to come here. As I say, it will be smart and controlled. Secondly, we are looking already in the common understanding at whether we can have a new relationship with the Erasmus Plus scheme, which is a student exchange scheme. We will only do that, though, on a value-for-money basis. And thirdly, I was very pleased to see the reference to artists, because one of the things we want to take forward is to allow our touring artists, our musicians, our fantastic cultural sector to be able to tour around the European Union more easily, which in recent years is something they haven't been able to do.
I wanted to touch on the OBR report, which was a sort of long-term report looking forward at our financing, fairly sobering kind of conclusions in it. Is it fair to say that a lot of what is promised to this country, to all voters of all political persuasions, isn't affordable going forward, and that we need a kind of wake-up moment in this country of what is possible in both the short and medium term?
Well, 2 points. I think, firstly, that report speaks to the structural weaknesses that we've inherited in our economy. And that is why this government has been right to put financial stability as the foundation stone of all our other policies, because without it, you can't have those other policies. But to the point you're asking about affordability, look, we are still a few months out from the budget, but what you can be assured of is when the Chancellor presents that budget in the autumn, where there are promises, where there are policies taken forward, we will always point to where the money is coming from, and that's the approach we've taken throughout.
I guess linked in my question is whether some of the rebels that you faced as a government last week need to read the report and realise that not every policy is possible, that these things come with a cost. Is there a sort of lack of clarity and understanding by some members of the left of your party about what is achievable?
No, I think in terms of what happened with the welfare vote last week, we've accepted that we went too quickly, and everybody has agreed that the existing system is broken and not working. We did move too quickly in terms of change. It is really important to take people with us, and that is what happened with parliamentary colleagues last week. But to the broader point, we were, as Labour MPs, we were elected with the mandate we were to government last year, and it was on a recognition that we would collectively never allow what happened with Liz Truss and the damage she did to our economy to happen again. And that is accepted right across the party, and that is why financial stability is the foundation stone this government's built on. And that is a different choice, by the way, to the risks that were taken by the previous government.
Just want to touch on one aspect of it that's got a lot of attention in the OBR report, the state pension, because we focus on winter fuel was going to save or not save £1 billion. We focus on the welfare adjustments last week was going to save or not save £5 billion. The state pension costs £125 billion per year. It's 46% of the overall welfare budget. All these forecasts show how much it's ballooning in the years ahead and ballooned in the last couple of years. Do you have to look at the state pension?
No, we've promised that we will maintain the triple lock for this Parliament. That is what we will do. People do deserve dignity in retirement, but it's also about the fact that pensioners who've contributed so much to our society are then in retirement. They are not in the position as other people in the population are to be able to add to their income. They tend to be people who are on fixed income. So we will absolutely be sticking to that pledge.
And no means testing for it, like the winter fuel payment?
No, we will be sticking to our pledge on the triple lock.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. The Paymaster General and the Minister for EU renegotiation. We're going to have a quick look at the weather now.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Returning high pressure will make it mostly very warm and dry this week, with heatwave conditions developing quite widely over the weekend. It's quite grey out there now, mainly for northern and central parts, with fog and drizzle on some coasts and hills. Sunny spells will develop through the morning, but western Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland will keep a lot of cloud. Patchy light rain will affect the blustery northwest, but elsewhere it'll be mainly dry, bar the odd shower over England and Wales. Top temperatures will be widely above average. The afternoon will bring more sunshine, but northwest Scotland will stay dull and damp.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll hear from a farmer who was left to clean up 40 tonnes of illegally dumped waste on her property.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Well, coming up in a moment, we'll get reaction to a Sky News investigation into the £1 billion per year problem of fly tipping, and we'll speak to a farmer who's been directly affected by that issue. But first, a recap of all of the day's top stories with Leah.
Yeah, we're talking about that special report by Rachel Venables because she's tracked down a group allegedly making big money from fly tipping on farmland, illegal dumping costs, landowners, of course, and the taxpayer thousands of pounds each year. The victims say the fines for those responsible are too small. Illegal migration will be the focus of talks between Sir Keir Starmer and the French president at Downing Street later, an issue Emmanuel Macron says is a shared responsibility to fix. He attended a state banquet alongside King Charles last night. More than 160 people are still missing. This is after last week's deadly flash floods in Texas. At least 109 people are confirmed to have died over the July 4th weekend, including dozens of children who were attending a summer camp. And the presence of IDF troops inside Gaza is understood to be the final sticking point, preventing a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, Israeli Prime Minister and President Donald Trump. Well, they met again overnight as negotiations continue in Qatar. And the government has been told to cut back on jury trials to save the justice system from total collapse. So retired judge Sir Brian Levison has made a series of recommendations, and it's all part of a landmark review aimed at tackling the Crown Court's backlog.
More now on our Sky News investigation. We've tracked down a group of allegedly making money from dumping rubbish in the countryside, leaving farmers with a costly clean-up bill. We're joined now by Evie Hunter, who had more than 40 tonnes of waste dumped on her farm. Evie, thanks so much for joining us. Just talk us through when this has happened and the costs it left you to pay.
I mean, it happens all the time. This wasn't an isolated incident, but the most recent dump, we had 50 tonne of rubbish dumped, which ended up costing us about £10,000 to have taken away. And then more money we spent on a brand new gate that was then 2 nights later cut open and they came in and dumped again.
I mean, it sounds like a huge amount of waste. Talk us through when you first saw that mound of waste. What was in it? How did you feel? Just your general reaction.
When we first saw it, unfortunately, they'd been going in there for what seemed like weeks, and we hadn't noticed because they'd been shutting the gate every time after themselves, so that we didn't notice. And absolutely everything, mainly builders' waste. You know, most of it comes from houses where people have had renovations, new kitchens, new bathrooms, and obviously left all the rubbish outside. Someone's come along and offered to take it away for a sum of £300-400, thought nothing else of it, and then obviously it ends up, like you can see, in our fields.
What means have been available to you to try and address this? Do you call the police? Who do you call?
It is fairly confusing. In Hertfordshire, it's investigated by the local council. Obviously, we would report it to the police anyway. You always try and report everything. But yeah, you never really feel like it's actually being investigated properly. I haven't heard anything back, and this dump was coming on for 4 months ago now. I went through it myself and found loads of evidence that pointed to companies, even pointed to fly tippers themselves, but since haven't heard anything back, which is really frustrating.
Evie, what's the situation now, and how do you even start to clean up that type of mess that we're seeing on the screen right now?
Some of us are lucky, is not really the word, but are insured for fly tipping. But that does come with a large sort of £3,000 excess. So obviously it's still going to cost us money every time to get rid of it. And yeah, I kind of think we should stop actually paying, even if it is insured, clearing it up, because why should we? I don't know one person that agrees that, well, we actually rent the land. We're not even the landowner, but because we rent it, it's our responsibility. I genuinely believe that we should stop clearing it up, and then maybe something will be done about it.
Do you have sympathy with the council if they're not kind of helping you on this quick enough because of the sort of weight of things they have on their agenda and the lack of funding, or not? Do you think this is something that they could be doing more about if they wanted?
I think this is something that they could be doing more about, but I genuinely feel like this should be escalated or changed so that it's a police matter to investigate fly tips on private land like it is in some other counties.
So that's interesting. In some counties, it is a police matter. That's down to your local council deciding for it not to be a police matter.
I'm not sure exactly how it works, but in some other counties where obviously fly tipping's become a major problem, like I believe in Hertfordshire it now has, it's down to the police to investigate, because obviously they'll happily go out and look for evidence, like I mentioned we did and the police do, but then ultimately they have to hand it over to the local council to deal with. And sometimes I think that's actually the sort of end of it. And we're not hearing, the police aren't hearing. And if the police are in charge of it, then they've got more authority to use the EA to investigate, which I think surely would be a better option.
Evie, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Evie Hunter joining us there. Much more on Rachel Venable's report is available on the website. Now, both England and Wales face must-win games in the Women's Euros. The Lionesses take on the Netherlands and Wales take on France in matches that could see them knocked out at the group stage. Here's Rob Harris's report.
Surrounded by the beauty and tranquility of Zurich, England have tried to stay calm. The team's priority, soul-searching rather than sightseeing, scrutinising what went wrong in their losing start to the Euros.
We weren't up to it against France. We're our own biggest critics as players, so we're all ready to get back out there and have another game.
And they're back here to face the Netherlands. The heat wave's gone, but the heat is on for the reigning champions and their manager.
We don't talk about consequences, we talk about our game plan again. We talk about what we have to do to be at our best and how we can exploit spaces that the Netherlands leave behind and how we can take out their strengths. We want to execute better, want to be less sloppy.
This is new territory for Savina Wiegman. Never before has she had to bounce back from a group stage defeat. In fact, as a national team manager, she's always reached finals, twice with England, twice with the Netherlands.
Fans are backing the Lionesses to avoid a group stage exit. That hasn't happened in any tournament since Euro 2013.
You've got to believe in the manager, you've got to believe in the team. I think as a fan, you can't, you sit there doubting it. You can't do that. But I think that there are questions being raised, but you've got to stick behind them.
Wales are in the same group, in the same predicament. After losing to the Dutch, realistically needing to beat France to have any hope of making the quarter-finals. But the team's plans were disrupted by their bus being involved in a crash on the eve of the match.
I think everyone from all the reports everyone's okay. Our priority is just to get them all together and away from the scene and then reassess. We've got great staff and we've got really good support for them, and we'll be checking in just to make sure they continue to be okay. And also, and just as importantly, I believe the other car involved, I think everyone is okay there as well.
This is the first time Wales have qualified for a women's tournament, so expectations are lower for fans.
We're realists, you know, we've played a very good side.
Anything's possible with the Welsh, and they play for the pride of the shirt and they give it their all, and that's all we ask for as fans.
But time could be running out for England and Wales in Switzerland. If both lose today, both teams will be planning flights home after their clash this weekend. Rob Harris, Sky News, Zurich.
Well, do stay with us here on The Breakfast Show. We're going to be back in a few minutes, and next hour we'll be talking to former Lioness Rachel Yankee. Quick break here on The Breakfast Show. We'll be right back.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders. It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbours, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical. Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history. The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbours that harbour decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day. Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate. It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
French President Emmanuel Macron has been treated to a lavish welcome at Windsor Castle as he begins a state visit to the UK. We're joined now to discuss a bit more detail. The Telegraph's entertainment and royal correspondent, India McTaggart. India, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning.
So, was this the centrepiece of a 3-day visit? I mean, you can't really beat a state banquet at Windsor Castle, can you?
You can't, no. And this was the really important part, I think. I mean, of course, it comes ahead of the political summit on Thursday, where we know Starmer is wrangling to get Macron to accept the one-in, one-out migrants deal. But I think this is really the UK's charm offensive, rolling out the royal family as the Foreign Office's sort of secret weapon, the diplomatic secret weapon. They have this soft-touch diplomacy, which is second to none, which can't be replicated in any other country. And I think really treating them to the pomp and pageantry yesterday, the state banquet, the actual procession from the Northolt to Windsor Castle, all of that is just testament to the King's deft touch in forging these diplomatic ties and sort of moving the dial a little bit on certain issues.
OK, let's get into the details. I call it a posh dinner. It was obviously a very special state banquet. In terms of the menu, it looked quite delicious. So we're talking, of course, canapés, some summer tender vegetables, there's a bit of chicken and Norfolk asparagus and a sponge cake. Wilf is taking issue with the drinks on offer.
I'm glad you've got me this menu, but it reads this, there's only one English sparkling on offer, then it's a French white, a French red, 2 French reds, and a French champagne. So 1 to 5 only. 1 out of 5 is an English sparkling. Couldn't we have showcased it a bit more?
Maybe we could have, but I do think it's important that we also sort of sampled French cuisine for the French state visit. I mean, it's the first French state visit since 2008 when Sarkozy came with Queen Elizabeth. And I think it's really important because it was also the first state visit for a European leader since Brexit. So I think in terms of sort of making these diplomatic ties clear, we need to pander to their cuisine a little bit.
And it was Raymond Blanc, by the way, who did the you know, who's a great sort of transatlantic, trans-channel French chef based in London for a long time. So I get that side of it, but you know, we don't have many chances to take on the French on the wine front. So that's all I was saying.
OK, fair enough. The Princess of Wales, this was her first, well, state banquet in about 2 years.
Yes, since her illness, yeah.
I mean, she looked wonderful, didn't she? She had that Sarah Burton Gavinci gown that she had on. What can you tell us about the tiara and the earrings, because they're quite special?
Yes, the late queens, they are quite special. They always very carefully choose what they're wearing to make a sort of testament to the country and to other members of the royal family. And of course, we had her wearing a Dior dress earlier in the day as well, French designer, the Givenchy as well in the state banquet, as you said. So of course, these are really sort of chosen on purpose,
to
right?
kind of upgrade. Do you think this is the moment that upgrades relations between Britain and France by this display of love and welcoming and inclusivity?
Yes, I think it's really important to display these diplomatic ties, sort of emphasise our shared democratic values at this time. You know, we've got a lot going on with the migrant crisis, and I think that's a really important hot-button issue that's going to come up on Thursday. So to have this sort of friendly welcome, the tactile welcome as well, that we saw the King give Macron. We know they have a long friendship in the past, and they've bonded over the environment. He's getting a personal tour of the gardens today. So it's a really sort of sweet visit, and I think they're also visiting Queen Elizabeth's tomb this morning. And
obviously, the King speaks very good French as well, as we know, because he made that address in the French Parliament in recent years. Why Windsor Castle versus Buckingham Palace? Do we get given detail on that? Is one seen as premium to the other or not?
It's not, no. We actually haven't had a state visit held at Windsor Castle for about 10 years because they've been held at Buckingham Palace. But because the palace is undergoing renovations right now, it was moved to Windsor Castle. So it's not that one is...
I'd pick Windsor if I ever got one over Bucks Palace, yeah.
I'm surprised you haven't already.
Well, yeah, I don't call it a state visit, but, you know. No, but I think I mean, listen, both are pretty epic, but there's a grandeur and a sort of...
yeah.
It's still very close to London. It's still easy for them to pull everything together. I don't know. Palace versus Castle. They're both pretty good.
Having said that, there were about, 160 guests in attendance. Do we know who was on that guest list?
We know some of the celebrity names. So Mick Jagger was there, Elton John was there with his husband, David Furnish. So there were a few star-studded moments. But of course, it's always a very diplomatic event too. So we have politicians there as well, and that is going to be the main focus in the next few days.
I think pop royalty, we're probably, we beat the world on as well. So you might as well roll it out. I'm amazed. It's only 160. I don't know if we've got that long shot again, guys, but it looked like 1,000 people.
Operationally, this is huge, isn't it? To get those starters out.
That long table as well.
All of the drinks. It's a huge operation, India.
Absolutely. It's a mega operation. I mean, any state visit is. And anything.
Yeah, but it's not just Raymond Blanc in the kitchen. They've got plenty of people helping.
Just him single-handedly.
I want to expect that part of it is very doable. And any more of the royal family involvement in the next couple of days, or is this part done?
So just this morning, where we have the private tour of the gardens that the King is giving Macron, which actually we think is a first for a state visit. So testament to their friendship and bonded sort of love of the environment and sustainability. And then the visit to Queen Elizabeth's tomb in Windsor Castle. So I think then the royal part is done and we move on to the political part.
Yeah. India, great stuff. Good to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining us, India McTaggart from The Telegraph. Now, Lena Dunham made her name with the New York-based series Girls, but her latest project is set on this side of the Atlantic. And her new Netflix series, Too Much, takes inspiration from her move across the pond and follows the character Jessica as an American starting a new life in London following the relationship breakdown.
Yeah, and ahead of the series release tomorrow, Lena spoke to Sky News about her love for British culture.
I think that I had so many fantasies. The first time I came to the UK, I was 13, and I came with my mother she was on a work trip, and I had been obsessed with it because I loved British novel. I loved Jane Austen. I loved Charlotte Bronte. I loved British film. I was one of those like little Anglophile kids. There was a pop show about S Club 7, and all I did was just sit in the hotel and obsessively watch things relating to S. So I didn't go home with all this like cultural British knowledge. I went home with a deep, abiding love of S Club 7.
Yeah, not sure about S Club 7 personally. Spice Girls all the way. Anyway, Sky News also spoke to lead actor Megan Statler about her experience filming in London.
My first impression of London was, this is so exciting, and it feels like New York, but cleaner, actually.
Interesting.
It feels like in New York is really fun and electric, but there's a lot of, you could see 15 rats run across the street. You guys don't have as many.
We have rats.
But not 15.
New Netflix series coming soon. Right, let's have a look at the weather.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, returning high pressure will make it mostly very warm and dry this week, with heatwave conditions developing quite widely this weekend. It's quite grey out there now, mainly for northern and central parts, with fog and drizzle on some coasts and hills. Sunny spells will develop through the morning, but western Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland will keep a lot of cloud. Patchy light rain will affect the blustery northwest, but elsewhere it'll be mainly dry, bar the odd shower over England and Wales. Top temperatures will be widely above average. The afternoon will bring more sunshine, but northwest Scotland will stay dull and damp. Expect further drizzly outbreaks there overnight, while low cloud will develop across Ireland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere it'll be mainly dry and clear, but some fog will form in the west. Sunshine will become fairly widespread tomorrow, but the far northwest will be cloudy again, with some patchy rain. It'll turn out very warm, locally hot in the south. It'll stay mostly settled on Friday, with temperatures climbing even further.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Lots more still to come here on The Breakfast Show. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll have all of the very latest, including ongoing discussions of possible tax increases to come.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on today's programme. The government reaffirms its commitment to the pension triple lock, but won't be drawn on how the Chancellor will fill the budget black hole.
President Macron heads to number 10 to hash out a deal on stopping the small boats.
Plus, could jury-free trials save the criminal justice system from collapse? How new recommendations are causing concern.
It's Wednesday, the 9th of July. Your headlines. Got the day right this hour. After a stark warning on the future of the country's finances from the budget forecaster, the OBR, Cabinet Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds leaves the door open for tax rises and spending cuts.
When the Chancellor presents that budget in the autumn, where there are promises, where there are policies taken forward, we will always point to where the money is coming from. A
signature state banquet for the French president and on a King's speech for the need for cross-channel cooperation.
Our security services and police will go further still to protect us against the profound challenges of terrorism, organised crime, cyber attacks, and, of course, irregular migration.
The £1 billion a year problem of illegal waste. We trace one fly tipping site back to a group allegedly making money from the crime. A second impromptu meeting between President Trump and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu late last night as ceasefire negotiations boil down to just one remaining issue. Very good morning to you. The government says they're sticking to their election pledges and this morning reaffirmed their commitment to the pension triple lock. It comes amidst a troubling report from the UK's official budget forecaster, the OBR, that the country's finances are in a relatively vulnerable position. I asked the Paymaster General, Nick Thomas-Symonds, about that warning and how the Chancellor hopes to plug the gap in the upcoming budget.
Look, we are still a few months out from the budget, but what you can be assured of is when the Chancellor presents that budget in the autumn, where there are promises, where there are policies taken forward, we will always point to where the money is coming from, and that's the approach we've taken throughout.
Do you have to look at the state pension?
No, we've promised that we will maintain the triple lock for this Parliament. That is what we will do. People do deserve dignity in retirement, but it is also about the fact that pensioners who've contributed so much to our society are then in retirement. They are not in the position as other people in the population are to be able to add to their income. They tend to be people who are on fixed income. So we will absolutely be sticking to that pledge.
And no means testing for it like the winter fuel payment?
No, we will be sticking to our pledge on the triple lock.
Mari's here to discuss all this. There's quite a lot in this interview, but what I thought was fascinating about this is a fairly senior cabinet minister, and typically they don't usually get drawn on what will or won't be included in the upcoming budget. To A, it's not their brief, B, it's to maintain as much flexibility until the last moment for the Chancellor. That was very explicit in terms of very big area of spending that will remain. Also was implicit on other past pre-election pledges. We're going to maintain this promise, it's not going to change. So again, it just points to the fact that when we approach the budget, it's the smaller levers that will be available to the Chancellor, not the bigger levers, whether that's cutting the state pension or increasing income tax, which means there's a lot of work to do with small policies rather than one big policy, is the implication.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be lots of fiddling, as you say. And I think there's two things on that. His response on the state pension. First of all, he wants to reassure people that it was a manifesto pledge, and like those three taxes that they've been talking about, they're not going back on a manifesto pledge. And the second thing I think that's interesting is because they have had such a torrid time when it comes to the winter fuel allowance cut and how much backlash they got politically and on the doorstep. And if you look at kind of the policies that they've implemented, it was the most kind of, it was the highest on the metric of how much the public are aware of. I think they are probably so paranoid about being seen to be taking money off pensioners, and they've still got the scars on the back from the fact that they've had to U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. They don't want any whiff of hint or speculation that perhaps they're coming for pensioners in another way, which is clearly why they are shutting that argument down immediately. The difficulty is that it feels slightly that at the moment we've got lots of politicians sticking their heads in the sand. The OBR are trying to kind of flash the red signal and say, hold on, something really quite big has got to change. And then you asked Nick Thomas-Symonds several very direct questions about some of the conclusions from the O'Barr report, and he didn't really engage with the questions, he just answered a different question. And clearly the government doesn't really want to get into that kind of nitty-gritty discussion or philosophical discussion, ideological discussion about how on earth we got here and how we get ourselves out of it, which is frustrating for people like us.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things, though, of course, in this OBR report is how many of the problems are building and they're long-term problems. Yeah. And, of course, we've seen so many governments sort of just focus on the next 3 or 4 years and not address those. It's almost like, well, if we can continue to afford to kick the can, we will. And that's kind of a little bit of it. Despite this big report, the day after it, is that still the approach? Kick the can down the road, it's a problem for somebody else. It seems that is the case. Obviously, we also touched on the Leveson review and also on President Macron's state visit. It feels like a lot is waiting on this policy that will or won't be announced on small boats. And they need it to do a lot of work for them, because the numbers at the moment, despite, again, what they might want to say, oh, the bilateral, friendly, cordial approach is working. Yeah. I mean, it's not in the headline numbers, and they really need something to materialise from this to kind of point to in the next day or two. They
do, and Nick Thomas-Symonds kind of refuted your question in terms of saying, you know, your approach is perhaps not working if you look at the numbers, and you're absolutely right, it's not working. Look at the numbers, we have record levels. But he was saying, no, it's working because of the people that we've stopped. And the difficulty is that's not going to be enough, politically or just sustainably. And so you have a situation where the government, as you say, they've got a lot riding on this state visit from Macron. And if they don't get a kind of shiny new policy, something that looks like it might really change the game in the Channel, announced in potentially the summit tomorrow, people might start asking themselves the question, well, what was this big fuss all about? What did we get out of it? And we already have Tory voices saying, you know, we're not getting value for money on the $750 million we sending to France to try and reduce the numbers of small boats. The difficulty, I think, is Labour now have 4 years left of their term. They've had some difficulty so far, but with the numbers going up, they have a short amount of time to really make a huge amount of difference. And it's going to be very, very painful and potentially politically fatal if they don't deliver on this. So they are going to have to find something to announce and then hope it actually works.
And, of course, a lot of political focus on that 3-day state visit today for President Macron. He's in the middle of the 3 days, and we've got more on that to come throughout the day. But also worth reminding us of what happened last night. It was a lot of pomp and ceremony at Windsor Castle, a star-studded guest list from royals to superstars, and the event, of course, at Windsor Castle capped off the first day of 3 of the President Macron's state visit. And here is Rhiannon Mills with all of the highlights. Oh, she's live. Gosh, fantastic. My mistake, Rhiannon. This is even better. What a fantastic upgrade. I should have scrolled down and read. Good morning, Rhiannon. And epic. So we were debating this earlier. What's better, a palace or a castle? And I was already concluding this yesterday from your VT, that the castle just looks so epic. It looks fantastic behind you today. And I loved the little quip from Macron as well to say, we love monarchies as long as it's not in our own country, as, of course, the head of state that he is in France. But a wonderful, warm relationship between the king and the president on show throughout yesterday evening.
Look, I would definitely go for a castle when it comes to a state visit. It might sound slightly peculiar, but the setting last night was just spectacular in St George's Hall, but actually felt much more intimate than when I've been for a look around the ballroom at Buckingham Palace when it comes to those state banquets. And really overriding the whole day yesterday was this real personal touch. It was really clear that both men have this amazing bond between each other. President Macron, of course, always known for being very tactile, but with the king, he almost seemed to be much more gentle. It didn't seem to be the political power play that we often see in front of the cameras. There is a huge amount of respect between the two men. Today, we're going to see a bit more of that. This morning, President Macron and his wife are going to place some flowers privately on the tomb of Queen Elizabeth II. The King is then going to take President Macron for a wander around the gardens here at Windsor. We know that the environment is an area where the two men have certainly bonded over the years. And then there's quite a nice touch where the Royal Mews are bringing out a horse that President Macron actually gave to Queen Elizabeth for her Platinum Jubilee. Goes without saying, really, that then the King is certainly handing over the President to Keir Starmer, probably all smiles, which I think the Prime Minister certainly needs at the moment.
It's Rhiannon, I'm interested on the event itself last night. Like, who else made the guest list? Who decides the guest list? If you're invited, does everyone, no matter what, say yes? Or is it something that's seen as a bit formal and boring? I mean, the pictures we were just looking at, epic, huge, great hall, long table. But is it fun? How late does it wrap up? Do they let their hair down, or is it very kind of tedious and formal?
Oh, I'd love to be able to tell you. Sadly, I've never been invited, but I think it's the kind of invitation that you don't necessarily turn down. You might remember that when the King went to France in 2023 for his inward state visit, the Palace of Versailles was kind of this glittering event, loads of stars, the likes of Mick Jagger, Hugh Grant, for example. So the bar was quite high for this state banquet. Last night, again, Mick Jagger was on the guest list. Also, Elton John, who... Quick Google and you'll find he only lives about, 10 minutes drive away from here on his own Windsor estate. He, of course, also has got a property in the south of France. So I think that guest list is quite an interesting choice of kind of political figures, also kind of some glitterati to make it feel like a really sparkling and special event. But look, you cannot underestimate how important yesterday will have been and this morning in terms of that soft power play. We have it in a way that no other country has. And also there's this genuine bond between the King and Macron. As the King yesterday said, actually this goes further than friendship. It's more like family. And those words are so, so powerful.
And they are both, it's fair to say, perfectly fluent in each other's language?
Yeah, they are, because the King, over the years, has spent so much time in France. Kind of, you could hear the French kind of just tripping off his tongue as he delivered that speech. That speech, though, was incredibly interesting because we knew that he was going to talk about challenges that know no borders. We'd been briefed that, look, he's not going to specifically talk about immigration, but he did. And, of course, it is the topic that none of them can avoid during this state visit. But it is that softly approach that the King can bring. I was talking to one diplomat who said, you can't underestimate just what the royal family bring in terms of that convening power, in terms of those quiet discussions behind the scenes, and making sure that those foundations of friendship are really, really strong, especially as Keir Starmer heads into those really key discussions about that issue over immigration and small boats, and they host that joint UK summit on Thursday.
Rhiannon, great stuff as always. It looks fantastic there. Enjoy that sunrise there at Windsor Castle. Great stuff as always, Rhiannon Mills there for us. So Rhiannon, by the way, is with me.
OK, fair
Castle
enough.
over palace.
But do you know, when you were asking her, did it get tedious, did it get boring, I kept having this image of my head of karaoke taking place, especially with Sir Elton John there. That didn't happen. I'm sure it didn't.
Do you know what? I mean, a live performance from Elton would be epic, obviously, a proper performance. Karaoke, I'd like to see the King and the President. That would be more enjoyable to watch.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I wonder what they'd pick. I always, typically pick an Elton song or an Oasis song or a Robbie song. Those are my kind of go-tos.
I bet you've got a good voice.
I'm afraid I'm totally and utterly tone deaf.
OK.
No, but the key thing, of course, about karaoke is you commit 100%, regardless of how bad you are. And then you get through it. Okay. Anyway, enough on the state visit.
Yes.
Pivoting now to all of the day's top stories.
Yeah, lots to bring viewers up to date, none least the events in Texas, because 160 people are still missing after last week's deadly flash floods there. At least 109 people are confirmed to have died. This was over the July 4th weekend, including 27 children at a girls' summer camp in Kerr County. Elsewhere, a 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. This is following a fatal stabbing. It happened in East London. 26-year-old Tyler Hayward was found with a stab wound in Waltham Forest on Sunday evening, and police are calling for anyone with information to do come forward. 7 home builders have agreed to pay £100 million. This is towards affordable housing. Really interesting, this. It's following an investigation into anti-competitive conduct. The competition watchdog found that developers had exchanged sensitive details about the property market, and their payment will help to fund hundreds of new homes for low-income earners and first-time buyers. And the Department for Education has come under fire from MPs over its handling of England's worsening teacher shortage. MPs say it's unclear how a promise to recruit 6,500 new teachers in England will actually be achieved. A committee has accused Downing Street of lacking a coherent plan. And an extra 263 people in London likely died in the recent heatwave. This is according to new analysis. It prompted warnings that British classrooms, homes and hospitals are ill-prepared to deal with increasing temperatures as another heatwave kicks in from today. And waste crime is a booming problem in the UK. The Environment Agency has described it as the new narcotics for the way it allows organised criminal gangs to cash in. Well, in the latest, in a series by Sky News, we've uncovered a group allegedly making money from fly tipping on farmland. Rachel Venables went to track them down.
In farmers' fields all over the country, organised fly tipping is destroying our environment and costing us billions.
My first line of defence, which were these gates, as you can see, they've been bent and broken.
The steel gates and concrete bollards which surround this one farm in Berkshire can't keep the criminals out.
Yeah, it's the bane of our life, really. Fly tipping, blocking up and unblocking the entrances. Constant battle.
It's costing the farmer tens of thousands of pounds every year.
We've had it on locations where organised gangs have actually broken into locations, put their own security man there and had fly tipping in from out of London. They filled the warehouses up to the eaves with contaminated waste.
Waste criminals will be paid to remove rubbish, but instead of taking it to the tip or landfill, which costs money, they dump it for huge profit in places like this.
We're in Hartwood Forest, just north of St Albans, a normally beautiful public space. But overnight, someone or a group broke in through the gates here and dumped lorry load after lorry load after lorry load after lorry load of rubbish and rubble. And they drove off, leaving it in this state.
We're on the hunt for the people responsible. And while looking for evidence, we find a huge amount of personal information telling us where this waste has come from.
That's the bags, which I believe is ours.
Builder Charlie, not his real name, paid 2 men with a van £300 to remove waste from a recent project.
Do you feel cheated?
I do, yeah.
With evidence from multiple customers, Sky News' data and forensics unit were able to track down a group of waste carriers working together. Videos they posted on TikTok show them clearing out properties, waving huge wads of cash at the camera. One such clip appears to show them shovelling debris into what looks like an abandoned warehouse, another more clearly on the side of a country road. We tracked one of them down to a housing estate in London.
And we believe that waste that you've been paid to remove has been dumped illegally in the countryside.
But I don't do rubbish removals.
Have you ever fly tipped? Have you ever made money from fly tipping?
No, I don't do rubbish removals.
He denied all knowledge of the dumping. Waste crime is a huge and growing problem, but enforcement is patchy and the legal punishments often lacking. Every time waste is illegally dumped, someone has to pay to clean it up, knowing that before long, it'll happen all over again. This is a national battle, one that we're all losing. Rachel Venables, Sky News in Hertfordshire.
And St Albans District and City Council told us it won't hesitate to prosecute or fine offenders once it has the necessary evidence, and that it's been taking robust action against fly tipping for years. And you can watch the full version of Rachel's special report by scanning the QR code. It's on the screen.
Right, time to speak to the Conservatives. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I know you only caught the back end of that Sky report on fly tipping, but is fly tipping an area where there needs to be tougher punishments to clamp down on it?
Yeah, earlier in the year, I proposed that we increase the penalties for fly tipping, and in fact that for persistent fly tippers, we even went so far as to have a potential prison sentence as well, because there's a major problem. It's across our country, both in rural areas and in our towns and cities, and you've seen just how bad this has been. In some places, I went to Birmingham earlier in the year, even before the bin strikes happened, to see some of the fly tipping that's going on there. And it's absolutely appalling. It's wrecking neighbourhoods, destroying quality of life, and so we should be bearing down on anyone who does it, frankly, but particularly the career criminals, the persistent people who are doing this time and again and getting away with it.
What do you make of the Leveson review to try and aid the enormous court backlogs that have persisted for years now?
Well, look, the first thing to say is we've got to get a grip on this challenge, because justice delayed is justice denied. It cannot be right in our country that someone is waiting until 2028 or even 2029 now for a rape trial to commence. That is just wrong. And at the moment, the problem is actually getting worse. The court backlogs are rising by 750 cases every single month under Labour. But the proposals brought forward by Sir Brian Leveson at the behest of the government are not the right ones, by and large, as far as we're concerned. It would see people like burglars or sick individuals like stalkers getting off having served just a fifth of their sentence in prison, just 20% of their sentence if they pleaded guilty early.
Well, hold on.
And it's
you're merging a number of things there, because that I imagine you're extrapolating that they would qualify for early release as well. That's got nothing to do with the sentencing.
It has. If you take together the two reports that the government
I know, but we're talking about the Leveson.
Well, the government has already accepted David Gauke's report. So if they accept Brian Leveson's report, bring the two together, it means serious criminals, like a burglar, like a thug who beat somebody up in the street, like a man who stalked a woman, if they pled guilty early, they would just serve 20% of their sentence. And if I may just make one more point, it also says, because I think it's worse than that, it also says that many offences, like shoplifters, thieves who are nicking things from stores on our high streets, like drug dealers, would get off with just an out-of-court settlement, so they wouldn't even have a criminal record at all. So all of these so-called minor crimes, which I think are really serious and are damaging people's lives and livelihoods right now, like mobile phone theft, like shoplifting, like having your van broken into and your tools stolen, people might not even be getting a criminal record for doing these things. It will just fuel all that level of criminality. So this isn't the answer. I think the answer is that we get our courts sitting more. At the moment, and Brian Leveson backs this up, there is plenty of potential for our courts to be sitting more days. He's said, let's go to 130,000 sitting days every year. That's 20,000 or so more than we have today. You don't start ripping up the way that our criminal justice system works or letting sick people and thieves off early when you can fix a basic administrative failure in the system.
Well, it sounds like that's an area of the Leveson report that you would agree with.
I do.
Then. And obviously we haven't seen what the government plans to do to enact or not parts of this report, which we should point to. But just to pick you up on you suggesting that people are going to get out with just 20% of their sentence. I mean, what's in this report? I think what you're trying to pair a number of things together from, but on this report is saying that if you plead guilty at the earliest possible stage, the discount you should be open to on your would-be sentence should increase from 33%, which it is currently, as per your government, to 40%. That's a relatively small increase and is what is new in this report.
No, I don't think that's a small increase. Look, I think people are already raging at the idea that you're a criminal, but you plead guilty, you get a third off your sentence today, and now it's being suggested that's increased to 40%. And couple that with the early release scheme and the changes that are being made by the government.
Was 33%, as you left it, after your government. Was that too high too?
I think that's high. I think if you ask the average man and woman on the street, people watching your programme today, they would say that that is already a massive discount. So if you go even further to 40%, that's making a mockery of the law. And imagine if your house was broken into and you found that the burglar who'd done that crime, if they went to court and were sentenced, were only actually going to serve 20% of the sentence because they pled guilty early and the government had made these changes to the way our system works. I think you would not consider that to be justice.
I don't think anyone would.
I come to this from a very simple principle.
That is
if
not
you commit a serious
it's not come
crime,
from anything that we're talking about today,
jail.
though. And it's interesting that you're saying that the 33% release, which was something that your government left, was too much. And
I think it's high. People at the moment think that people are not serving proper sentences and they're being released early from prison, and that is making all of us less safe. I mean, you saw the other day. Just remember, the MI5, the National Crime Agency, the head of the Metropolitan Police, in an unprecedented intervention, came together and said that the measures the government were already proposing as part of the David Gauke review were going to make us less safe. I think that they are like giving a get-out-of-jail-free card to criminals. If you couple all of that with this, then I think people are going to look, the criminal justice system is just broken. You know, this is not justice for victims of crime in our country.
And to be clear, obviously, the government now has to digest this report and introduce its legislation in relation to it later this year. Also, you know, you mentioned more court sitting hours. Let's move on to the next topic. That's something I think a lot of people can understand, but it comes at a cost. You have to pay people more. And we saw yesterday a big report from the OBR, and it sort of highlighted not just the short-term issues in the government finances, but the long-term problems. One area that's got a lot of focus is the state pension and how expensive it is. On reflection, was the triple lock something that was a mistake to commit to?
Well, we are committed to the triple lock, and we have no plans to change that. Where I think
it's very expensive.
Where I think we should be looking at is welfare reform and net zero. And those are other areas that the OBR rightly alighted on yesterday in their very concerning report. They said, frankly, that the cost of net zero is immense. You're talking about £800 billion to manage the transition to net zero. We cannot afford the kind of net zero zealotry that you're currently seeing from Ed Miliband. That's making people poorer, it's harming our public finances, and it's further deindustrialising our country. So just as Kemi Badenoch said in a speech she made a few months ago, I think that we should be taking a much more pragmatic and sensible approach to that decarbonisation and ensuring that we actually do this in a way that is affordable. There's no prizes for being the first country in the world to decarbonise. It is unilateral economic disarmament. And on welfare, we've got to ensure that we bring down the benefits bill. It's ballooning at the moment. And what we saw last week in Parliament is that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have now lost control of their backbenches. There's no realistic prospect that they're going to do sensible reforms to the benefits bill. It's just going to keep rising and rising and rising year in, year out. And what I'm very worried about is that we're going to find ourselves in a financial crisis where the bond markets say we've no confidence in Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. They have no plan to cut government spending. They've no proper economic growth strategy. And they cannot control their backbench to the point they can't even deliver the basic measures in a budget. Therefore, we are not going to keep lending money at the rate that we have in the recent past to this country. And that is going to be a really serious crisis for our economy.
Yeah, no one wants a repeat of the bond market crisis that of course, happened in the latter years of the Conservative government.
Yeah, but just remember, gilt yields today are higher than they were after Liz Truss's mini-budget. And Rachel Reeves herself at that point...
all sorts of different
Rachel Reeves herself at that point said that Liz Truss had crashed the economy. So by Rachel Reeves' own metric, she's crashed the economy.
It's a wild leap to claim that. We could dive into bond yields in length if you really want to, but I don't think it'll give us much benefit. Just want to pick you up on this welfare thing, because I think this is really important. There's lots of areas that people can argue, rightly or wrongly, you could address to try and cut the welfare bill if that's your aim. The state pension is nearly 50% of the welfare budget. It costs £125 billion a year. It's 5% of GDP. So we can argue for political reasons, oh, we would do this one or we would do that one. But all of the numbers, no matter, all of these small levers, save £1 billion here, save a little bit here. But you argue to cut the welfare bill, but then politically continue to say, well, we'll keep the triple lock, we're not changing anything. you can only make changes around the edges on the welfare bill unless you in some way address the state pension. I mean, the other question I put it to the government this morning is, should it be, like the winter fuel bonus payment, should it be means tested?
No, that's not our policy. And look, I am the Shadow Justice Secretary. It's ultimately a decision for our leader, Kemi Badenoch, and the Shadow Chancellor to make policy on our pensions plans in the future. But we've no plan to change that today. And there is a moral case for ensuring that people have dignity and respect in old age. But I disagree with you when you say that we cannot find big savings elsewhere in the welfare budget. Of course we can. We've got 8 or 9 million people in our country who are economically inactive. We've far too many people on benefits today. I want to help those people back into the workplace, both because it's important for our public finances to set the country up on a sustainable footing for the future, but also because it's the moral thing to do. It's not right to see, particularly young people, out of work, sat at home in their their childhood bedrooms, waiting for their lives to begin, particularly people who are concerned about their mental health. We've got to help those people and get them back into the workplace. That is what the focus should be on. Labour were just tinkering around the edges, proposing some very modest reforms that weren't even going to cut the benefits bill. They were just going to stop it rising as fast as it was going to. It looks like they're not going to be able to do any of those things now. And I'm also very surprised to see, frankly, Reform getting into bed with Keir Starmer on that. You know, I understand that Keir Starmer might do this, but I was very surprised to see Nigel Farage doing it as well, saying that he would scrap the 2-child benefits cap so that parents who have 3, 4, 5 kids will get thousands of pounds extra in benefits for that. I don't think that's right. We should be backing people who want to live within their means and make responsible decisions in life.
Robert Jenrick, great to see you as always. We're out of time. Thanks so much for joining us, the Shadow Justice Secretary. Time for a quick look at the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Returning high pressure will make it mostly very warm and dry this week, with heatwave conditions developing quite widely this weekend. It's quite grey out there now, mainly for northern and central parts, with fog and drizzle on some coasts and hills. Sunny spells will develop through the morning, but western Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland will keep a lot of cloud. Patchy light rain will affect the blustery northwest, but elsewhere it'll be mainly dry, bar the odd shower over England and Wales. Top temperatures will be widely above average. The afternoon will bring more sunshine, but northwest Scotland will stay dull and damp.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show, we will be discussing the Leveson review into sentences and all areas of the justice system.
we are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back to the Breakfast Show. Well, coming up, will reforms to the court system help victims get justice faster? We'll be joined by a former High Court judge, Sir Nicholas Mostyn, plus Maxime Rosen from Rape Crisis England and Wales. But first, a reminder of all of the day's top stories.
Thank you, Wilfred. The government says they're sticking to their election pledges and reaffirmed its commitment to the pension triple lock. But it does come amidst troubling reports from the UK's official budget forecaster that's basically saying that the country's finances are in a relatively vulnerable position.
When the Chancellor presents that budget in the autumn, where there are promises, where there are policies taken forward, we will always point to where the money is coming from.
Illegal migration will be the focus of talks between Sir Keir Starmer and the French president at Downing Street later, an issue Emmanuel Macron says is a shared responsibility to fix. He attended a state banquet alongside King Charles last night. Sky News has tracked down a group allegedly making money from fly tipping on farmland. Illegal dumping costs landowners and the taxpayers, of course, and thousands of pounds each year. And victims say the fines for those responsible are too small. And the government has been told to cut back on jury trials to save the justice system from total collapse. Retired Judge Sir Brian Leveson says he's made a series of recommendations. It's part of a landmark review and it's aimed at tackling the Crown Court's backlog.
Well, let's pick up with that story. As we mentioned, we're going to be talking to a couple of expert guests on it in just a moment. But first, Sally is here to break down some of the key takeaways from what has been included in this review.
So this review comes because of that backlog. We have 75,000 cases currently waiting in the criminal justice system to be heard. That is the size of the backlog. Some people are waiting until 2029 to have their cases heard. And just imagine what that does for victims who are waiting for that justice. So Brian Leveson has come up with a list of recommendations of things that can be done to quicken this process up. It ranges from stuff like greater use of out-of-court resolutions. This is for low-level crimes and first-time offending. Maximum sentence reduction increased to 40% for guilty pleas at the first opportunity. And this one, which is a judge-alone trial, which is essentially the removal of the jury in certain cases. So the way it will work is over two different systems. One is that in the Crown Court, where a defendant elects to have the jury removed, that can happen, or where the judge thinks it would be the right thing to do, and also in a new Crown Court bench division, where there'd be a judge and two magistrates. Now, so Brian Leveson goes through why he thinks the jury might be the ineffective tool here. And he says it's because jury times have more than doubled since 2001. Judges are taking longer to give juries their directions. It is harder for people, he says, to take off those 2 weeks that is necessary on average to hear a case, but also on the impact on jurors' private lives when it comes to this. But it's not without criticism, because the Bar Council, which represents barristers, says essentially you shouldn't be taking the jury away because the jury aren't the problem in the first place, is what they've said. Changing the fundamental structure of delivering criminal justice is not a principled response to a crisis which was not caused by that structure in the first place. We continue to argue that there is no need to curtail the right to trial by jury. From both a principle and practical position, juries represent society and are a fundamental part of our system. Brian Leveson says that juries are only used in about 1% of criminal cases across England.
Sally, that's a great setup for us. Thank you very much. Well, in a moment, we'll talk to Sir Nicholas Mostyn, a former High Court judge. But first, let's speak to Maxime Rosen, the head of policy and public affairs at Rape Crisis England and Wales. Maxime, thanks so much for joining us. Just how bad are the statistics in the area of sexual offence or rape trials, and in terms of the delays that are existing at the moment?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Yes, so ultimately the Crown Court is in crisis and it's been getting worse for years. Whilst the Crown Court backlog for all offences has almost doubled in 5 years, the backlog of sexual offence cases has more than trebled in that same period. Currently, we've got 12,500 survivors of sexual violence and abuse waiting for a trial in the Crown Court. And sexual violence survivors are actually waiting the longest for their trials to go ahead out of all case types, aside from fraud. The issue isn't just waiting for a trial date to come around. Many survivors are turning up, sometimes on the day, only to be told that there's no barrister, courtroom or judge available to hear their case. They're then being sent away, often for a year or even longer, to wait for a new trial date. And this can happen several times. We've heard from women who have had up to 6 failed trial dates spanning 5 years. And that's on top of the years it took to go through a police investigation.
Maxime, talk to us about what urgent reforms you would personally like to see.
Yeah, so I think just to set the context, the impact on survivors of all of this is huge. Survivors caught in the Crown Court backlog tell us about the severe impact of on their mental health. They're essentially living in limbo, waiting for their trial to go ahead. And many of them are unable to stay engaged with the system. They're reaching breaking point. We've currently got 1 in 5 adult rape survivors withdrawing support for their case after an offender has been charged. Many understandably are withdrawing because of the appalling wait for trial, meaning they don't get justice they deserve. We've been calling for years for radical reform, and we're really pleased to see finally on the table some radical recommendations from Sir Leveson this morning. We're still working through the detail of that review. However, what I would say realistically is even if the government do accept the recommendations in full, implementing them is going to take years. Meanwhile, we still have thousands of survivors of sexual violence who have been through this incredibly traumatic experience being re-traumatised by the courts as we speak. And we've also got rape crisis centres who are under incredible strain. They're facing increased demand for specialist support, in no small part because of the Crown Court backlogs. But these life-changing and often life-saving centres are facing funding cuts and even closure. We've seen 3 rape crisis centres close their doors in the last 12 months due to lack of funding. So whilst we welcome radical long-term reform, we really need the government to take action now and cover some of the things not picked up by the Leveson review. So most urgently, we're calling for 3 things this morning. So that's the prioritisation of sexual violence cases with guaranteed fixed trial dates. We need urgent investment in specialist services to support survivors, whether they choose to report or not. And we also need the specialist sexual violence courts that were promised in the Labour manifesto.
Well, thank you so much, Maxime, for setting it out for us and highlighting how important reforms are, whether they're short-term or long-term. Let's now dive into some of the detail of the Leveson inquiry with Sir Nicholas Mostyn, a former High Court judge. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. One of the headlines in this that people are focusing on is to not have juries potentially for cases that the sentence could be only a 2-year maximum sentence. How does that sit with you?
It sounds a sensible idea.
Tell us why.
I mean, the backlog has to be tackled. 70 to 80,000 cases are waiting. Some cases waiting for 2 years. There have to be dramatic reforms. I personally think that jury trials, are to an extent regarded as a sacred cow. Perhaps this sacred cow, in some cases, has to be taken to the abattoir. But I mean, it's not in Magna Carta. It's not one of those great constitutional things, the right to jury trial. We abolished it in defamation cases a decade ago, and I can't see why retaining it for those cases where minor offences, where the sentence couldn't be more than 2 years, where the defendant is electing for a jury trial, can be justified in the face of this crisis.
Another recommendation is that the discount you get on your sentence if you plead guilty very early in the process should be increased from a 33% discount as it is currently to a 40% discount. How does that sit with you?
Well, that does slightly strike me as sacrificing principle on the altar of expediency. But again, you know, when needs must, when facing the crisis, I think that the thing that is most damaging to the justice fabric in this country are these delays. I mean, I agree with your previous interviewer. The justice delayed is justice completely denied.
And the impact of that backlog is huge. So would you welcome a greater focus resolving matters outside of the court in some cases?
Well, I would. I mean, I noticed that Sir Brian did recommend deferred prosecution schemes. There is a system for corporate defendants who are facing bribery and corruption trials that they have deferred prosecution agreements, which is like a sort of terrifying yellow card. You pay a lot of money to avoid a trial, and if you do the same thing again, you will face the music. He didn't actually recommend that for serious offences. I think that where people are charged with serious offences, that an opportunity of that should be made available.
To me, based on how you just framed that sounds like rich people will be able to avoid jail time, but poor people won't.
Well, I mean, rich people can afford good lawyers, and poor people can't. I mean, it has always been one law for the rich and one law for the poor, but it's not at the moment.
I mean, gosh, that's terrifying that you, as a former High Court judge, framed that the current system is that. But this would surely sort of embed that more clearly in the actual sentencing rules rather than just purely based on access to lawyers.
No, we already have deferred prosecution agreements for bribery and corruption cases with corporate defendants. And the agreement, I mean, they are quite controversial. I happen to think, and Sir Brian has recommended that scheme should be extended in minor cases. I think that they should be extended in all cases because, as I say, all these measures are necessary to address this absolute crisis. I mean, I cannot see when you have a backlog of this long and people are waiting for 2 years or 3 years for their cases to be heard, how they can be heard justly. I cannot see how witnesses can be expected to remember what has happened. So all these steps, I mean, they do slightly grate, but they are contrary to principle in some respects, but they are, in my opinion, necessary.
Really interesting to get your perspective. So, Nicholas, thanks for joining us.
Okay.
Good to see you. Now, more than 110 people have been injured after wildfires broke out in France's second-largest city, Marseille. Let's get a report from Thomas Moore, who's there for us. Thomas, how bad has it been?
Well, Marseille came very close to a very, very serious situation yesterday evening. We are on the northern edge of the city in an area called Estac. This is one of the fire stations where almost 1,000 firefighters have been battling the wildfires that have come over the hills in Scrabland just behind here to the very edge. We've seen water bomber helicopters going overhead. There's a lot of activity still with firefighters being moved from area to area, but it is much calmer today, both in terms of activity but also the weather. And it is the wind, the Mistral wind, which fanned the flames yesterday so that they were moving at their peak almost 3/4 of a mile every minute. But the winds died down. Firefighters were able to bring some sort of control to the fire, but it is still active on the edges, and they're very concerned that the winds will pick up later today and rekindle those fires. Now, this area was under, in essence, lockdown yesterday. Residents were told to stay at home, shut the windows, shut the shutters, stay off the road so emergency services could move around. But 400 people were evacuated and to local gyms, and 50 spent the night here. Now, they're not being allowed home yet because it's not safe for them to do so. There are 60 houses or so that have been burnt. But as you say, so far, only minor injuries, 110 minor injuries. And the Interior Minister, Bruno Retailleau, he said it is incredible that nobody died. But he is saying that there's every reason to think we're going towards a high-risk summer because it's very early in the season to have a fire of this scale.
Thomas, great stuff as always. Thanks so much. Thomas Moore there in Marseille. Now it's crunch time for England and Wales in the Women's Euros. Both teams need to win today to stay alive in the tournament. The Lioness taking on the Netherlands. Wales are facing France. Let's bring in the former Lioness Rachel Yankee, who joins us now. Delighted to have you with us, Rachel. We want to get to your charity in just a moment. But first up, a massive, massive game for both teams.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for having me on. It is. It's an exciting day. I feel quite positive, and I hope that by the end of the day I'll still have that same positivity. But yeah, it's a must-win game, and I think that everyone knows that. The players will know that, and sometimes that brings out the best in us. So I'm hoping of a fantastic performance. Most of all, a win for England later.
And Rachel, you're in Oxford this morning, loads of goalposts behind you, getting ready for an event. Tell us a bit about where you're at.
Yeah, we're in Oxford with Play Their Way, and the girls behind me that you'll see playing, fantastic footballers, the next generation coming through. So it's really good to be here and watch them play. But the initiative is all about, people's first impressions of sport and making sure that that's a positive one. So for these girls, they've been working with the coaches and really feeling valued in the session. The session outline has been they've helped to design that. The information that was within that session, they've actually created in terms of some of the skills that they want to do, the way that they want to finish and score goals. So it's about actually making them feel valued, and their input is valued. And there was research done in 2022 to show that the difference between the dropout levels of boys and girls once they finished primary school was just, the difference was huge. The 43% of girls then drop out of sport. They've been active in primary school, and then once they move on to secondary school and further, they start to stop playing or slow down their playing, and the reasons were confidence, were that lack of enjoyment, their first impressions of the sport were just not enjoyable. So Play Their Way have created some resources for coaches and teachers and parents and anybody really to actually get these free resources to sign up on playtheirway.org and just think about a different way of coaching young girls when they're actually introducing them to sport, and making sure that is a way of making them feel part of the sport rather than just being told exactly what to do.
Forgive me, Rachel, it sounds brilliant. I just wonder if you've spoken to any of the girls behind you today and what they're saying to you about the Euros.
I have spoken, and when I got here, they were all chanting, "Come on, England!" So they're very invested. They've made score predictions. One of the girls said it was going to be 3-1 to England, which I hope she's right. They're very invested. They're enjoying their morning here. Then they're off to school, and then back to watch the game at home. So they're very excited, and which is fantastic, and that's what we want. I mean, we saw obviously in 2022 with the England win, the way that that galvanised and inspired the next generation to play, and hopefully we can go and have another impressive tournament. And it's always more difficult to go and win tournaments back to back, especially with the start we've had. But it's not impossible, and hopefully there can be a next generation inspired again with this team.
How hard is it to bounce back in a major tournament from a first game loss? Or do you think actually it's a nice potential little wake-up call before we get to the knockout stages?
Yeah, I don't think it's difficult, because I think once you looked at our group is by far the hardest group in all of the Euros. So, I think all teams... Oh, there's a wasp there, sorry. All teams, Netherlands and France, England and Wales, also looked at that group and thought it's going to be extremely difficult to get out of. So I don't think it's a shock to lose the first game. It's obviously not what you want. But, you've got the other two games that are must-wins. This game tonight is definitely one that I think the England team will be really positive going into it. They'll know that they can, if they perform how they should, they can go and win this game. But they equally know if the Netherlands, bring their A game, that they can get, they can make it tough and they can get beaten. So they have to make sure that they think on on a sort of final mentality, that it's a must-win game, winner takes all, and go out there and give everything. And I think we've got good squad balance that, it'll be interesting to see which team starts, and I'm sure it'll be a different team that finishes.
Rachel, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us. Much appreciated, as always. By the way, we're going to be joined by Rob Harris live in Zurich in the next hour, the preview of those two massive games for England and for Wales. Today, time for a quick look at the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Returning high pressure will make it mostly very warm and dry this week, with heatwave conditions developing quite widely this weekend. It's quite grey out there now, mainly for northern and central parts, with fog and drizzle on some coasts and hills. Sunny spells will develop through the morning, but western Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland will keep a lot of cloud. Patchy light rain will affect the blustery northwest, but elsewhere it'll be mainly dry, bar the odd shower over England and Wales. Top temperatures will be widely above average. The afternoon will bring more sunshine, but northwest Scotland will stay dull and damp. Expect further drizzly outbreaks there overnight, while low cloud will develop across Ireland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, it'll be mainly dry and clear, but some fog will form in the west. Sunshine will become fairly widespread tomorrow, but the far northwest will be cloudy again with some patchy rain. It'll turn out very warm, locally hot in the south. They'll stay mostly settled on Friday, with temperatures climbing even further. That's your weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Lots more still to come here on The Breakfast Show, where we'll be discussing, of course, more on Rachel Venable's report into flight tip. We'll get that live report from Zurich ahead of the latest Euros, and discussing with Mohamed El-Erian the implications of the OBR report.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on today's programme. The government reaffirms its commitment to the pension triple lock, but won't be drawn on how the Chancellor will fill the budget black hole.
President Macron heads to Number 10 to hash out a deal on stopping the small boats.
Plus, could jury-free trials save the criminal justice system from collapse? How new recommendations are causing concern.
It's Wednesday, the 9th of July. Your headlines. Well, after a stark warning on the future of the country's finances from the budget forecaster, Cabinet Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds leaves the door open for tax rises and spending cuts.
When the Chancellor presents that budget in the autumn, where there are promises, where there are policies taken forward, we will always point to where the money is coming from.
A signature state banquet for the French president and a King's speech on the need for cross-channel cooperation.
Our security services and police will go further still to protect us against the profound challenges of terrorism, organised crime, cyber attacks, and, of course, irregular migration.
The £1 billion a year problem of illegal waste. We trace one fly tipping site back to a group allegedly making money from the crime. And a second impromptu meeting between President Trump and Israel's Prime Minister last night as ceasefire negotiations continue. A very good morning to you. The government says they're sticking to their election pledges and this morning reaffirmed their commitment to the pension triple lock. But it comes amidst a troubling report from the UK's official budget forecaster that the country's finances are relatively vulnerable. I asked the Paymaster General, Nick Thomas-Symonds, about that warning and how the Chancellor hopes to plug the gap in the upcoming budget.
Look, we are still a few months out from the budget, but what you can be assured of is when the Chancellor presents that budget in the autumn, where there are promises, where there are policies taken forward, we will always point to where the money is coming from, and that's the approach we've taken throughout.
Do you have to look at the state pension?
No, we've promised that we will maintain the triple lock for this Parliament. That is what we will do. People do deserve dignity in retirement, but it's also about the fact that pensioners who've contributed so much to our society are then in retirement. They are not in the position as other people in the population are to be able to add to their income. They tend to be people who are on fixed income. So we will absolutely be sticking to that pledge.
And no means testing for it, like the winter fuel payment?
No, we will be sticking to our pledge on the triple lock.
Mari's here to discuss this and all of the day's politics. Fascinatingly clear pledge on the state pension. By the way, also got that from Robert Jenrick on behalf of the Conservatives. And it's rare that cabinet ministers do make such explicit pledges ahead of a budget and usually say, I don't want to get involved in the precise details. So, you know, that to me comes across as there's absolutely no way they're touching that. And it brings up the other question of, do they stick to the other manifesto pledges on taxes, which of course covered all working people? And the result being is there's not many big levers that the Chancellor can pull.
Yeah, I mean, this is what a lot of economic commentators were really talking about during the election campaign, was that Labour were boxing themselves in by committing to, as you say, VAT, national insurance, income tax, not going up, the three big levers, the triple lock, and all the things that are huge kind of possible areas of getting cash. And so you end up with a situation where you're trying to kind of tinker around the edges and do lots of little things, and half of them, it appears, you can't even manage to do anyway because your backbenchers won't let you. So you end up in a situation where you have less and less options, and some of them might be more uncomfortable, but perhaps not as politically fatal as something like the triple lock. For instance, when we saw the winter fuel allowance changes, there was such a huge public outcry, such a massive outcry among Labour backbenchers, and it really damaged the Labour Party. And to an extent, I think they have a bit of the scars on their back from that debacle and don't want any kind of suggestion that the triple lock is not safe under a Labour government. And so you end up with them committing to it. It was in their manifesto, and therefore they're not going to break it. But what the OBR is saying is we perhaps need to have a bit more of a honest conversation about where our economy is going, the state in which it finds itself because of COVID, economic shocks, etc. And essentially we need to start being maybe slightly more realistic about what we can and can't afford to fund. But both parties, as you saw from your interviews this morning, don't want to engage at all on a conversation on the triple lock, and that's because it would damage them politically and be incredibly unpopular.
Obviously, President Macron is here for his state visit, a day that gets a bit more political today after the pomp and ceremony of yesterday. What in particular could be on the political agenda?
So, yes, today is much more political. Today and then tomorrow is the France-UK summit. And we're going to have Starmer and Macron in deep discussions in Whitehall today after PMQs. And really, this is going to be a day or two of really, really intense discussions and negotiations around lots of things, not just migration, but migration is the kind of centrepiece politically. We've had the King talking about it, Macron talking about it, a lot of the EU are actually talking about it this morning as well, and also, of course, us here in the UK. And the expectation for Labour is they have to do something on small boats. They've only got 4 years left before a general election. Record numbers crossing the channel, and so the rhetoric is not matching up with reality and time is running out. Macron also saying he wants to engage with the UK on that, so the question is, could we see some big announcement on small boats? What would it be? There is a lot of speculation on this one in, one out policy, a possibility of a policy. We were talking about it yesterday, speaking to Home Office sources. They don't want to get ahead of what might be announced, but it does feel that something is coming. But if it's not that, there might be a slight feeling of disappointment that if there's something that's announced that's not as big or not as ambitious, people might say to themselves, we've had this huge 3-day state visit and all this, cash has been spent and we've really rolled out the red carpet, and what have we got to show for it?
Well, I'd also just posit the idea that even if this one in, one out policy is announced, in the short term, it might provide a lot of ammunition to the government's opposition because it's not going to lower numbers yet. Numbers are high. And, of course, when you're in opposition, it's easy to say, well, we just stop the one in and we wouldn't offer up one out in terms of the balance there. So we'll see. Even if that's the big win, it might even attract some criticism.
Yeah.
Of course, the details are what will matter, and we don't know those yet, so we'll wait and see. Mara, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Let's get a perspective now from our royal commentator, Rhiannon Mills, who joins us from Windsor Castle this morning. Rhiannon, great to see you again. Why don't we just pick up on Mari's point there about the King's comments last night? There was a sort of very, very shortened King's speech aspect to it about what the French and British governments will be working on in the next couple of days, including, the relatively hot-button topic of illegal immigration.
These speeches are always, I think, a really interesting mixture of, in a way, a kind of history lesson about what we've shared in the past, but also they are written very closely with the government. The government has an eye on that speech. And so Number 10 will have very clearly sort of said it would be very helpful if you alluded to certain things. And we knew that the King was going to talk about the complex challenges that are facing the two countries, and then talk about how those complex challenges know no borders. That borders word was particularly striking to me when I first read it. The palace was saying, no, he's not just alluding to immigration. He's also talking about defence in terms of Ukraine and Russia. He's also talking about things like artificial intelligence and the climate crisis. But then yesterday, the King, in that speech, did specifically mention the immigration issue. And that, of course, has been overshadowing this 3-day state visit in a way that I think with other state visits we've not necessarily seen an issue that's been so much there hanging in the background with other heads of state visiting.
Rhiannon, in terms of who was there, we mentioned last hour a little bit of the pop royalty with Sir Elton and Sir Mick and some other entertainers as well. As for the actual royal family, who was there with the King and Queen as well?
Well, look, you just have to look at all of the front pages of the newspapers this morning, and it was the Princess of Wales who was really the standout royal guest. Of course, she's had to miss the last couple of state visits in terms of the banquets because of her cancer diagnosis and then her cancer recovery. So it was really special to see her there last night. And also, I think it really emphasises how, as a family, they realise the important role that they have to play when it comes to playing hosts to a world leader like President Macron. The closeness between the two men that we saw yesterday, including President Macron winking at any member of the family that he could possibly lay eyes on, which was amazing to watch in the state banquet. The closeness between the two men, it almost feels like this was a really personal invitation from the King to President Macron. Look, come and spend some time in Windsor. But yeah, you have to remember that invitations for state visits are always at the request of number 10, at the request of government. And this one comes at a particularly important time. And we will see that when it comes to the more difficult, hard political discussions that are going to take place over the next couple of days.
Is the King done and dusted now, Rhiannon, or does he pop back in and bid them farewell at the end, or any further appearance?
So not quite. We are still going to see a bit more of President Macron with the King this morning. President Macron and his wife are going to, first of all, lay some flowers on the tomb of Queen Elizabeth II. They're going to do that privately. Then the King and President Macron are going to have a little wander around the gardens here at Windsor. We know that the environment is one issue that they kind of really share a common interest in. And then there's a really sort of nice touch. And again, look, it's ticking that box about a shared history. President Macron will be, if you like, reunited with a horse that he gifted to Queen Elizabeth II for her Platinum Jubilee, but also they'll be shown a carriage that was given to Queen Elizabeth II by King Louis Philippe back in the 19th century. So yeah, it's all been about that really personal touch, the shared history, and do not underestimate how important that has been, especially with the King last night saying this isn't just about friendship, this is more about family.
Rhiannon, great stuff as always. Look forward to further coverage throughout the course of the morning from Windsor. Rhiannon Mills there for us. Right, time to get up to speed on all the day's other top stories. Leah's got those for us.
Thank you, Wilfred. More than 160 people are still missing after last week's deadly flash floods in Texas. At least 109 people are confirmed to have died over the July 4th weekend, including 27 children at a girls' summer camp in Kerr County. 7 home builders have agreed to pay £100 million towards affordable housing. This is following an investigation into anti-competitive conduct. The competition watchdog found the developers had exchanged sensitive details about the property market. Their payment will help to fund hundreds of new homes for low-income earners and first-time buyers. An extra 263 people in London likely died in the recent heatwave. This is according to new analysis. It's prompted warnings that British classrooms, homes and hospitals are ill-prepared to deal with increasing temperatures as another heatwave kicks in from today. Now, waste crime is a booming problem in the UK, and the Environment Agency has described it as the new narcotics for the way it allows organised criminal gangs to cash in. Well, in the latest in a series by Sky News, we've uncovered a group allegedly making money from fly tipping on farmland. Rachel Venables went to track them down.
In farmers' fields all over the country, organised fly tipping is destroying our environment and costing us billions.
My first line of defence, which were these gates, as you can see, they've been bent and broken.
The steel gates and concrete bollards which surround this one farm in Berkshire can't keep the criminals out.
Yeah, it's the bane of our life, really. Fly tipping, blocking up and unblocking the entrances. Constant battle.
It's costing the farmer tens of thousands of pounds every year.
We've had it on locations where organised gangs have actually broken into locations, put their own security man there and had fly tipping in from out of London. They filled the warehouses up to the eaves with contaminated waste.
Waste criminals will be paid to remove rubbish, but instead of taking it to the tip or landfill, which costs money, they dump it for huge profit in places like this.
We're in Hartwood Forest, just north of St Albans, a normally beautiful public space. But overnight, someone or a group broke in through the gates here and dumped lorry load after lorry load after lorry load after lorry load of rubbish and rubble. And they drove off, leaving it in this state.
We're on the hunt for the people responsible. And while looking for evidence, we find a huge amount of personal information telling us where this waste has come from.
That's the bags, which I believe is ours.
Builder Charlie, not his real name, paid two men with a van £300 to remove waste from a recent project.
Do you feel cheated?
I do, yeah.
With evidence from multiple customers, Sky News' data and forensics unit were able to track down a group of waste carriers working together. Videos they posted on TikTok show them clearing out properties, waving huge wads of cash at the camera. One such clip appears to show them shoveling debris into what looks like an abandoned warehouse, another more clearly on the side of a country road. We tracked one of them down to a housing estate in London.
And we believe that waste that you've been paid to remove has been dumped illegally in the countryside.
Well, I don't do rubbish removals.
Have you ever fly tipped? Have you ever made money from fly tipping?
No, I don't do rubbish removals.
He denied all knowledge of the dumping. Waste crime is a huge and growing problem, but enforcement is patchy and the legal punishments often lacking. Every time waste is illegally dumped, someone has to pay to clean it up, knowing that before long, it'll happen all over again. This is a national battle, one that we're all losing. Rachel Venables, Sky News in Hertfordshire.
St Albans District and City Council told us it will not hesitate to prosecute or fine offenders once it has the necessary evidence, and that it's been taking robust action against fly tipping for years. So that's their statement in relation to Rachel's report. And of course, you can watch the full version of Rachel's special report. Just scan the QR code, it's on the screen, and we'll actually have it later in the hour on Sky News.
Yeah, well worth digging into that in more detail. Now, Sky News understands a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas could be close, with just one major sticking point remaining, that of IDF troops operating inside Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister and President Donald Trump met again overnight as intense negotiations continue in Qatar. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has the latest.
Sense of momentum certainly here in Washington. A second and unexpected meeting between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. It lasted around about an hour at tea time in Washington. We don't know what was discussed. What we do know is that of the three key challenges remaining which prevent Israel and Hamas from agreeing to a ceasefire, two of those three challenges have now been overcome. One is the issue of humanitarian aid. Who distributes it within Gaza? Well, we understand it has been agreed that in areas where the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, is not operating, the areas they pull back from, the aid will be distributed not by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this American-funded, Israeli-run organization. Instead, it will be either the UN or another third-party, more traditional aid organizations who distribute the aid. Hamas is pleased with this. Israel appears to have accepted this. The second issue, which is now agreed, is the 60-day ceasefire. Hamas has a concern that after 60 days, after it's given away all its chips, effectively, to put it bluntly, handed over all the hostages, that Israel would then simply re-invade Gaza and start the war again. Well, Hamas, appear to have got a commitment, pretty extraordinary, from President Trump, that he will ensure that Israel goes beyond 60 days and does not re-invade. So that is the good news. The bad news, and it is obviously naturally the hardest one to overcome, which is why they haven't yet done so, is the status of the Israeli forces in Gaza beyond during this ceasefire and beyond 60 days. Where does the IDF withdraw to? Do they withdraw altogether? Absolutely not, says Israel, because Hamas will simply rearm. Do they withdraw to certain parts of the Gaza Strip? Perhaps. This issue they are not yet agreed on. It could be pretty challenging. Netanyahu's due to leave Washington on Thursday. The best case scenario is that Netanyahu, with Trump, would announce some sort of a ceasefire, but we are not there yet.
Mark Stone there for us in Washington. Right, time for a look at the weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Returning high pressure will make it mostly very warm and dry this week, with heatwave conditions developing quite widely this weekend. It's fairly grey out there at the moment, mainly for northern and central parts, with fog and drizzle on some coasts and hills. Sunny spells will develop through the morning, but western Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland will keep a lot of cloud. Patchy light rain will affect the blustery northwest, but elsewhere it'll be mainly dry, bar the odd shower over England and Wales. Top temperatures will be widely above average. The afternoon will bring more sunshine, but northwest Scotland will stay dull and damp. That's your weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
So to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to be talking about why the government has been told to cut back on jury trials.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Early low cloud over northern and central parts will break up this morning to give sunny spells, but parts of western Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland will stay grey. Expect some drizzly rain in the blustery northwest, but most other places look dry. Top temperatures will be widely above average. The afternoon will bring more in the way of sunshine, but northwest Scotland will stay dull and damp. The warm, mainly fine conditions mean pollen levels will be high generally, only falling, to low in the cooler, damper northwest.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, thousands of defendants could lose the right to a jury trial under plans proposed to save the criminal justice system from collapse. Well, Sadia's here with more details on this. We're talking about the Brian Levison reports just come out today. It was needed for what reason and what are the key headlines?
So it's needed because of the backlog of cases that we have. More than 75,000 criminal cases that are waiting to be heard. I think that just gives you an idea of just how many people. Some people are waiting up to 4 years for their cases to be heard. And just a reminder of what that does for victims who are waiting for justice. So Brian Leveson come up with this report. He was commissioned in December to do this. He's come up with a list of recommendations of what he thinks will help speed things up in the courts system. These things include reclassification of certain cases, diverting cases to the magistrates' courts or to a lower sort of like Crown Court bench division, greater use of out-of-court resolutions. This is for low-level crimes or first-time offenders. Maximum sentence reduction increased to 40% for guilty pleas at the first opportunity, and judge-alone trials, which would see the removal of the jury in some places. And he recommends that these things need to happen immediately.
The sort of headline-grabbing part is that suggestion that for certain sentence length crimes, remind us exactly what, you wouldn't have a right to a jury. How would that adjust things? So jury isn't actually, the right to trial by jury isn't actually a constitutional right. So we already don't have juries in a lot of cases. Brian Leveson says that only about 1% of criminal cases in England and Wales do have juries. That length of time that you're talking about is 2 years, so sentences that are 2 years or below. Essentially the way it would work is you would have the Crown Court bench division, which would have a judge and 2 magistrates instead of any sort of jury, but that's a different matter. But in the Crown Court, for a very small number, he says, and he anticipates, there'd be no jury where the defendant elects for a judge-only trial, and also where a judge thinks that it would be more timely to do that, or if a case is particularly complex. And he says this is because of a whole range of reasons. He talks about the jury times that juries are taking more than doubling since 2001. Judges are taking longer in giving juries their directions, but he also talks about the impact it has on jurors who have to take out time from their lives, the impact it has on their personal lives to be able to be part of a jury. Some people say that things like that are making the jury system fairer because they've got more evidence, and the Bar Council certainly says that the jury isn't the problem here, so they shouldn't be the ones that are being removed. Really interesting, Sadia. Thanks so much for that, and obviously something we discussed with the government and with Robert Jenrick earlier, both of which you can find online. Still coming on The Breakfast Show, we're going to talk about the triple lock, about the OBR report yesterday and the government's finances in general with Mohamed El-Erian. That's next.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up in a moment, we will be live in Zurich with our sports correspondent Rob Harris ahead of 2 crunch matches at the Euros today for both England and for Wales. But first, a reminder of all the day's top stories.
Thank you, Wilfred. Well, the government says they're sticking to their election pledges and reaffirmed its commitment to the pension triple lock, but it comes amidst a troubling report from the UK's official budget forecaster that the country's finances are in a relatively vulnerable position.
When the Chancellor presents that budget in the autumn, where there are promises, where there are policies taken forward, we will always point to where the money is coming from.
Illegal migration will be the focus of talks between Sir Keir Starmer and the French president at Downing Street later, an issue Emmanuel Macron says is a shared responsibility to fix. He attended a state banquet alongside King Charles last night. Sky News has tracked down a group allegedly making money from fly tipping on farmland. Illegal dumping costs landowners and taxpayers thousands of pounds each year. And victims say the fines for those responsible are far too small. And the presence of IDF troops inside Gaza is understood to be the final sticking point preventing a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister and President Donald Trump, they met again overnight as negotiations continue in Qatar.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much. Well, the government has this morning reaffirmed its commitment to the pension triple lock despite mounting pressure on the budget. In a new report yesterday, the UK's official budget forecaster warned that the country's finances are in a relatively vulnerable position. Let's discuss it now with Mohamed El-Erian. He's president of Queen's College at University of Cambridge. Mohamed, great to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining me. There's so much in this report that we could focus on. But one area I think is worth touching on is the size of our annual deficit, which is much lower than it was during COVID. It has come down successfully from that. And it is strikingly, which perhaps we'll come to, lower than in the US. But relative to a lot of the developed world, it remains fairly elevated.
Yes, we rank among the top, unfortunately, in terms of deficit, debt, borrowing cost. And the issue that the OBR and others have been stressing is that we're running out of flexibility, that the ability of the government to respond to its current needs and then any other shock, and we've had many shocks, as you know, Wilfred, is getting more and more narrow. And that's a real issue going forward.
Obviously, there are various ways you could address this: borrow more, spend less, or tax more. Where is our overall tax level at the moment? It is elevated compared to recent decades, but it is lower than a lot of EU countries.
It is. It's elevated. We haven't seen these levels of taxation for a very long time. The problem is that there is almost nothing else to do, Wilfred, other than increase taxes now. Spending is very difficult to cut. We saw that last week with the welfare reform bill that got gutted. We can't borrow that much more. Our borrowing costs are already elevated. So the government is going to have to revisit its pledges on income tax, on VAT, on employee national insurance contributions. And the answer to all this, unfortunately, is not cut more, tax more, it is grow more. And we need to see much more being done to grow this economy.
So just touch on that point you just made there about kind of promises to the electorate. As you assess things coming up to the November, if it is 15 or 20 billion or so of tax increases that are required, is it increasingly economically foolhardy to keep political promises and not address some of those big levers of taxation, or is it reasonable to continue to do so? I guess, is there a greater political cost or economic cost?
So certainly there'll be a political cost because the government will be going back on a promise. But the world has changed. I think most of us recognize the world has changed. And the longer it takes for the government to tell us what they're going to do, the greater the uncertainty, the more likely businesses are to wait on investment decisions. And growth, which is the solution to all this, growth will stagnate further. So, the government will need, in the next few weeks, not wait till the autumn, in the next few weeks, come up with a plan on what it intends to do, and critically, Wilfred, critically, combine this with a stepped-up growth policy that focuses on innovation. We do amazing things in life sciences, in AI. We need them to be diffused through the economy to get the productivity gains that promote higher and more inclusive growth.
You mentioned life sciences and AI there, and I know you're president of Queen's College, Cambridge. I know you're standing to be Chancellor of Cambridge University overall. Snapshot for me the opportunity that we have in the education space and Cambridge specifically. Are we still the best in the world in that sort of area or not?
We certainly are very close to China in the US, and we're the best in Europe. The innovations and startups in Cambridge alone are the largest in Europe. So think about that. We have the innovations, but when it comes to scaling up, where do businesses go? They go to the US. And that means a loss of a lot of things for the UK. So we need to have this transition from startup and innovation to growth and scaling up. And that's possible. It just needs a lot of focus, and it needs accelerated implementation.
Is there a bigger opportunity than we've had for a while for our top universities, given the sort of clashes between government and education in the US at the moment?
There is, but there are also greater challenges. I mean, that's the irony, is right now we have more opportunities and more challenges. So I'll give you an example. There are many brilliant professors and students wanting to come to the UK, but it's hard to fund them. It's hard to pay their salaries. It's hard to find them accommodation. So as much as there are promises, the UK university system faces challenges first and foremost on funding. Then let's not forget the attack on free speech and on academic freedom. That is really important. And let's also not forget that we have to evolve the way we teach, the way we research to maintain our academic excellence. So it's this incredible situation where you have lots of opportunities and lots of risks. And what you need to do is mitigate the risks and unleash the opportunities.
I wanted to touch back on the US, Mohamed, with you, because the deficit we've touched on in the UK is high. The US is higher still, to quite an extraordinary level, and will remain there now for at least a couple of years, following the back of the one big, beautiful bill passing. Is it sustainable at the level in the US? Why have they got borrowing costs lower than the UK, for example, when the deficit is rising so much?
You know, it's this notion, Wilfred, of the cleanest dirty shirt. People have to wear something, and if your shirt is not pristine, you will wear your cleanest dirty shirt. The US is the cleanest dirty shirt. Why? Because it issues the dollar. The dollar is the reserve currency, so it has a much longer runway for fiscal irresponsibility than any other country. Now, at some point, it runs out of runway. It won't do so immediately, but you're starting to see the markets get nervous. And that's bad news for us, because we import the market jitter from abroad. And the last thing you need is, in a situation where global markets are uncertain, there becomes a UK-specific risk factor. That's what happened during the Liz Truss moment, and that almost put the pension system down. So, you know, there are two very important considerations. One is that the whole world is getting more risky, and two is that the UK, as the OBR showed, has very limited flexibility to respond.
Mohamed, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Mohamed El-Erian joining us there. Now, both England and Wales must win their games today in the Women's Euros. The Lionesses taking on the Netherlands and Wales take on France, matches that could see them knocked out of the group stage, at the group stage, I should say, if they lose today. Rob Harris joins me now from Zurich with a preview. Rob, both teams, I mean, it's not quite must win, but it pretty much is. It certainly must not lose.
Yes, and obviously the expectation levels are very different. For Wales, it's their first ever women's tournament. They're the lowest ranked team in the competition. But England come in as the defending European champions. And yet, on Saturday, when they lost to France, it was the first time since the World Cup in 2015 that they'd lost a group stage game. So it really does give a sense of where things are at now. Speaking to the players, they're trying to refocus. They're trying to work out what went wrong against France in that 2-1 defeat, the sloppiness, trying to regain their composure. But they really do stand on the brink of exiting this tournament in the group stage unless they can beat the Netherlands tonight. The Netherlands, to add the subplot, of course, the homeland of Serena Wiegman, the Lionesses' manager, and previously she led them to Euros glory in 2017. In fact, all 4 tournaments she's ever managed at, she's always taken the team to the final. The Netherlands twice, and of course England twice with that World Cup final 2 years ago as well, which they lost to Spain. So will they change things tonight? That will be the big thing, the things that are being asked for, perhaps some tactical tweaks. As for Wales, well, they're up against France, the conquerors of England. They do need to really realistically win as well if they've got any chance of making the quarterfinals. Concerningly for them, on the way to the stadium for their activities on the eve of the match, their bus was involved in a minor crash yesterday. No injuries reported amongst any of the Wales delegation or indeed the driver of the other vehicle, but certainly something that shook them up. So it's all to do tonight. England are up first here in Zurich against the Netherlands. Then later on it is the Wales-France game. We could be facing a scenario, not many want to hear this, that both teams could be out of contention before they meet themselves this week in a showdown. But for now, of course, England trying to stay positive, and maybe if they look at the recent Netherlands results before this tournament, well, the Dutch drew to Scotland and lost 4-0 to Germany. So they'll be hoping it's that Netherlands that turns up here tonight.
Certainly will, Rob. Thanks so much for that preview, and we hope that rather depressing eventuality that you teased there won't materialise, and good luck to them both tonight. Right, still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to be talking about the new narcotics. It's a special investigation from Rachel Venables in Sky News into how illegal fly tipping is spoiling Britain's countryside.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
$1,500 movies? I don't want this flight to end. fly Emirates, fly better.
Well, let's get more now on our investigation into fly tipping, as Sky News has uncovered a group allegedly making money from illegally dumping rubbish on farmland. The problem's been dubbed the new narcotics as it becomes increasingly prevalent in the countryside, leaving farmers with hefty clean-up bills. Rachel Venables has this special report.
Counting their cash, they flaunt it at the camera. This group have clearly made a lot of money. But how? They're waste operators, clearing out homes, gardens and building sites. But Sky News believes that some of the rubbish this group was paid to dispose of legally actually ended up being illegally dumped, fly-tipped. We've been investigating the boom in waste crime, described as the new narcotics, and blighting farmers and landowners all over the country.
My first line of defence, which were these gates, as you can see, they've been bent and broken.
The steel gates and concrete bollards which surround this farm in Berkshire cannot keep the criminals out.
It's the bane of our life, really. Fly tipping, blocking up and unblocking the entrances. Constant battle.
There's obviously an element of real organisation here and criminality.
We've had it on locations where organised gangs have actually broken into locations, put their own security man there and had fly tipping in from out of London. They filled the warehouses up to the eaves with contaminated waste.
It's costing them tens of thousands of pounds a year.
We're here to grow food, to feed the nation. We don't want people blocking it with fly tipping.
Waste criminals will be paid to remove rubbish, but instead of taking it to the tip, which costs money, they dump it for huge profit in places like this. Over the past 8 weeks, Sky News visited these 3 large fly tip sites, just 3 miles apart in Hertfordshire.
We're in Hartwood Forest, just north of St Albans, a normally beautiful public space. But overnight, someone or a group broke in through the gates here and dumped lorry load after lorry load after lorry load after lorry load of rubbish and rubble. And they drove off, leaving it in this state.
I haven't got any words that I would be able to use at the moment to describe it on camera. It's absolutely disgusting. We're out here working most of the day, you know, various jobs, probably about as hardcore about 20 volunteers. And you can imagine some of them don't know about this yet, but make them cry, I think, you know. It's horrible.
We're on the hunt for the people behind this, and while looking for evidence, we find a huge amount of personal information.
We're just looking in these bags for anything that gives us evidence or information about where this could have come from. Invoices, names, receipts that can help us work out who's done this.
Soon, in a second site in a nearby field, we find both names and addresses.
But you can sort of see it all over there.
Builder Charlie, not his real name, says he paid 2 men with a van £300 to remove waste from a recent project.
Yeah, you can see the bags in here. Oh man. Yeah, that's the bags, which I believe is ours.
He tells me one of the men had an official Environment Agency issued waste carrier's licence.
Did you ask them where this would end up, or did you just presume they would do it right?
Well, I presume they're doing right, like everyone else we have.
And how does it feel to stand here to know that they've just pocketed your £300 and done this to the environment?
Disappointed.
Do you feel cheated?
I do, yeah.
If individuals were paid around £500 for each van load removed and dumped, then this third field of more than 40 loads could have been worth around £20,000 to them. But the landowner, a farmer, says it could cost him nearly £50,000 to clear it up properly. With evidence now from multiple customers, Sky News' data and forensics unit were able to track down a group of waste carriers working together.
They post a lot of videos on TikTok. We found a video of them when they were travelling down Coleman Green Lane, the same lane as 2 of the fly tip sites that we found on the edge of St Albans.
In another TikTok video, they're getting rid of a coffin, We found a coffin dumped at the third and largest fly tip site. Videos posted by the group on TikTok show them clearing out properties, waving huge wads of cash at the camera and unloading waste. One clip appears to show them shoveling debris into what looks like an abandoned warehouse, another clearly on the side of a country road. We tracked one member of the group to a housing estate in London.
We believe that waste that you've been paid to remove has been dumped illegally in the countryside. Can we ask you some questions about that?
About what?
Fly tipping.
Well, I don't do rubbish removals.
You don't do rubbish removals? Well, what's this?
The airbag is not for rubbish removals.
What does it do?
I do for work.
For work, okay.
Yeah.
Do you know this man? On TikTok, that coffin looks a lot like a coffin that was found there.
Yeah.
So this is the sort of thing that we've been finding, which is why we wanted to ask you these questions. Because it's a huge problem. And it's costing the farmers, the local council, a huge amount of money. Have you ever fly tipped? Have you ever made money from fly tipping?
No, I don't do rubbish removals.
Okay.
How do you make your money?
By work. Fencing.
He denied all knowledge of the dumping. Waste crime is costing us an estimated £1 billion every year, but enforcement is patchy and the legal punishments often lacking.
If you put it in a field, it's free. If you take it to an HWRC or to a landfill site run by waste operators, then there's what's called a gate fee, which then has to be paid per tonne effectively of waste that you're depositing. So it's difficult often for regulators to catch them, and then when they are caught, penalties are, if they're not done in the right way, are low, and it's not a deterrent for them.
Last year, local authorities in England dealt with 1.15 million fly tipping incidents, a 6% jump on the previous year. But just 63,000 fixed penalty notices were issued, a 5% drop, while the average court fine was only worth £530. A council spokesperson said fly tipping is a criminal offence, punishable by heavy fines and even imprisonment, and the rubbish involved can be a health hazard, harm the environment and cost a considerable sum to clear up. When we have the necessary evidence, we will not hesitate to prosecute or fine offenders. We have been taking robust action against fly tipping for some years. Every time waste is illegally dumped, someone, the landowner or taxpayer, has to pay to clean it up, knowing that before long, it'll happen again. This is a national battle, one that we're all losing. Rachel Venables, Sky News in Hertfordshire.
Let's have a look at the weather now.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Returning high pressure will make it mostly very warm and dry this week, with heatwave conditions developing quite widely over the weekend. It's quite grey out there now, mainly for northern and central parts, with fog and drizzle on some coasts and hills. Sunny spells will develop through the morning, but western Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland will keep a lot of cloud. Patchy light rain will affect the blustery northwest, but elsewhere it'll be mainly dry, bar the odd shower over England and Wales. Top temps will be widely above average.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
I was getting mocked. Top temps. You didn't.
Top temps.
Yeah, I don't know where that came
I love
from.
it.
Started badly, and I couldn't read the headlines 3 hours ago. Getting mocked as we end as well.
Oh, it's okay.
Well,
We're at
only
the end
just
of the
okay.
show.
We're at the end of the show. Yeah, well, exactly. Could have saved another minute, not mocked me whilst still on air. Anyway, a couple of minutes left. Bits of focus today on the political front. We'll come to maybe Macron in a moment, but you're mentioning reform that we haven't talked about. Their pledge on the two-child benefit cap?
Yeah, so we've been talking lots about welfare and benefits and the different parties' positions, and we know that the Reform Party want to lift the two-child benefit cap, and this is something that the Conservative Party think they can weaponise because they think it makes reform much more like Labour when it comes to welfare, and they think that they can essentially brand themselves as the only serious party on welfare. And I found it interesting because I think some people felt that it was a bit of an eyebrow-raising policy for the Reform Party. But clearly the Reform Party have started to figure out that actually their aim is to have things that are fiscally slightly more left-wing liberal, but socially slightly more right-wing. And that seems to be what they think is potentially a sweet spot.
Remind us, where's the government on the two-tile cap at the moment?
So they say that they
It's quite the question.
open to lifting it. I know. They said they're open to lifting it. They want to reduce child poverty, but they don't know yet if they can afford it. And essentially they say that their position hasn't changed. They want to look at all the different ways to reduce child poverty. And there has been a bit of an implicit indication that the welfare U-turn and the rebellion is perhaps making that harder to lift now.
When does the political part of the agenda with President Macron really get started? Because we sort of started by saying it was all today, but actually he's got a tour of the Windsor Castle gardens first, which is important but not political.
No, so really it's after PMQ. I'm so savage. After PMQs, then things really get started, and then we can see what happens in the next 24 hours.
And we haven't mentioned PMQs at all, because last week was quite
My goodness. And this is the first PMQ since then, so I'm sure Rachel Reeves,
I understand that's how it works, 1 week later.
Beaming this week to make up for it.
Mari, Leah, great stuff. As always, we are out of time here on The Breakfast Show. Sky News Today with Simon next.